Hi, I'm Carlin Borisenko. In early 2020, I was the knitting Democrat who accidentally went viral on the internet for going to a Trump rally and then left the party. I became the conservative darling, was on all the shows, traveled around the country, and then realized that conservatives were no better than Democrats. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's that both political tribes are two sides of the same coin. But it wasn't all bad. On my journey, I became obsessed with understanding the woke ideology and the culture war. I broke the story of the city of Seattle doing segregated training with its employees.
How bad has this stuff become? The city of Seattle has now put out, I'm not kidding you, this is according to Dr. Carolyn Borisenko, who's an organizational psychologist. The city of Seattle asked its white employees to voluntarily spend a day off in a training about their internalized racial superiority.
I broke the story that led to the first ever federal lawsuit against critical race theory in the schools. I broke the Coke Be Less White story, one of the biggest anti-woke stories of all time. It got over 30 million views. Coca-Cola's corporate headquarters even had to change their outgoing voicemail.
Throughout the past few days, you may have seen inaccurate reporting on the content of our recently launched diversity, equity, and inclusion training program.
I exposed the schools in Burlington, Vermont for grooming middle school children live on the internet. They called me an unwoke cult leader for that. And the Vermont Human Rights Commission slandered me publicly as being a hate channel. I even got called a hero in Breitbart for exposing that the Washington Post was writing a hit piece on Christopher Rufo. I have broken story after story after story about what's going on in the public schools, from Cambridge, Massachusetts, to autistic sex education, to the Department of Education in Michigan, literally training teachers all over the state how to groom children. I wrote a book called Actively Unwoke, the ultimate guide for fighting back against the woke insanity in your life. I host a podcast all about fighting back, and I'm downloading all of my knowledge to you on my Substack, carlin.substack.com. The world is a crazy place. We are literally surrounded by cults on all sides. On this show, we're going to do a deep dive into all aspects of the culture war, and I will show you the dark, dystopian underbellies on both sides. Here are the commitments I'll make to you. I will always tell you the truth. I will always bring you receipts. And if you stick with me, I promise you will see the world differently. Welcome to the cult. Please mount that like button for me and subscribe if you feel so inclined. Well, hello, everyone. Happy Friday. Now, this is normally the time where I say, we did it, we made it through another week, and now it's time for happy hour. Because usually on Fridays, we do happy hour, which is an ironically named stream because happy hour is usually not like all that happy, but we try to make it fun, where we watch a woke training from start to finish and we talk about it, and I have some beers and we have a good time of it. And that is what you do when you have no life and you only end up streaming on the internet or being in the audience for my streams on the internet. Anyway, I was looking for a woke training for us to do for happy hour today. And I was fully committed to just like going on with business as usual. But I got to tell you guys, I was up to like 4 a.m. in Twitter Spaces last night, and I guess suffice it to say that with what is about to happen in Gaza, it just felt a little bit wrong to do like a woke training today, because I don't know how many of you are following along, but there's about to be a genocide in Gaza. Like for real, like no joke. And I was thinking about this all yesterday when essentially what happened is Israel basically told everyone in northern Gaza to leave. This is like 1.1 million people. And they just told them, get out. We don't have any place for you to go. We don't have any plan. You don't have any food. You don't have any water. You don't have any fuel, because Israel has been cutting off all, like Gaza has not had water for 6 days. They don't have fuel. They don't have electricity. They don't have food. And then Israel's like, GTFO 1.1 million people, don't know where you're going, but you can't stay here. and they gave them 24 hours to leave before they're starting their ground offensive, which should be starting within a couple of hours. And what they're really doing is they're genociding the Palestinians. Can we just get to brass tacks? This is what they're doing. And so I was up last night, and there are people on Twitter that are trying to get awareness around this and what's happening. And they were doing Twitter Spaces last night. And just to be clear to everyone, I mean it when I say it, that I don't just go to one side or the other. I think that people who have watched my content now for a while know this. I am no one's fucking tribalist, okay? I listen to what people say on all sides of the issue. I look at the evidence on all sides, and then I make an assessment of what I think is happening. And yeah, Tayton, yeah, isn't it crazy to say that Israel is being fascist? Yeah. Never become the monster you're fighting, guys. Never become the monster. I never in my life have cared if someone is Jewish. Makes no difference to me. When people on the internet were ranting about these Zionist conspiracies, I was like, all right, settle down. Come on. It truly never made a difference to me. Until this week, when I couldn't criticize anything that the government of Israel has ever done without getting called an anti-Semite. Or until this week, when I couldn't, not even the government of Israel, apparently I'm not allowed to criticize anyone Jewish. Not for anything related to them being Jewish, but if a person happens to be Jewish and I criticize them for something that has nothing to do with them being Jewish, I'm called an anti-Semite. And this is what happened in the knitting wars. This is what happened is no matter what you say, you're going to be painted as the bad guy, and the truth doesn't even matter. And it's when you're vilifying people who aren't doing anything wrong, who aren't doing anything hateful, who are saying, I don't agree with this for reason X, Y, B, and Z, and you're using that as a reason to hurl a name at them or an insult at them to try to shut them up, because that's really what this is. It's to try to shut people up. That's a problem. And it's been a very eye-opening week, and I've got more to say about that in a second. Naruto, thank you for the super chat. Did you see that U.S. is urging Israel to wait on the ground invasion until the Palestinians can leave? The U.S. has already sanctioned this. The U.S. has already sanctioned what Israel is doing, and the Palestinians can't leave. Just so people are really clear, the Palestinians cannot leave. Where are they going to go? There's no way for them to leave. And you're talking about the evacuation of millions of people who have no water, have had no water for 6 days, have no food, have no fuel. They have no fuel, guys. They don't have gas. No electricity, no internet, nothing. Don't tell me this is acceptable. I believe Israel has a right to exist, just like I believe anyone has a right to exist. I believe Israel has a right to defend itself. Defending itself in this case means going after the people who actually attacked them, not innocent civilians. I do not believe that Israel has the right to genocide an entire people over land, which is exactly what's about to happen. So, I couldn't just sit back and watch the same old queer theory training or the same old whiteness training or the education equity stuff. I just couldn't do it today. I'm sorry if that disappoints people. I promise we'll get back to our regularly scheduled programming. I really think this is I think the first happy hour that I've preempted in 3 years. The three and a half years that I've been doing happy hour, I think this is the first one that I've ever said, we're going to do something different today. Because I want to understand more about this. And the person that I want to understand more about this from is someone who I think has a nuanced take on it. And luckily for us, just the other day, he was on Elijah Schaefer's show, and this is what we're going to watch today. We're going to watch, and I think Elijah has actually been good on this too. I think actually Elijah has been one of the few people that I think has had the correct take on this. To Betty on Facebook, I've talked to multiple people there. You guys don't like you. I'm going to be really honest, Betty. You guys don't like when anyone talks to Palestinians because you guys consider Palestinians to be subhuman. I've been hearing about it all week. We'll talk more about that in a second. Sadly, I don't have Scott Horton here with me. I realized, like, after I set the title might be a little, like, deceitful. I didn't mean to imply that he was here because I just decided to do this, like, an hour ago. But I think that Elijah has been pretty good on this, and I trust Scott Horton's perspective. And Elijah had Scott Horton on a couple days ago to talk about the whole situation, and I've been wanting to watch this anyway. And so I thought that we could just watch this. So I do apologize. Like, I didn't actually mean to imply he was here. It was just I was, quick today. Sorry, Luke. Sorry. But yeah. See, shit like this, I'm gonna be honest. I've had it. I've had it with every single time I express an opinion about Israel that people don't, which I don't actually think that my opinions are actually all that crazy. I'm just like, hey, can you not genocide a people? Can you not do that? Can we all agree that might be a bad fucking idea? Like, does no one else have a problem with this? And as soon as I say, maybe we shouldn't be genociding an entire people, I have people like Betty Ann that come in and be like, you don't even know what you're talking about. Yeah, so they didn't file, so the stream from yesterday did get pulled down. It was some sort of copyright thing that I'm working through with YouTube. They did not give me a copyright strike though. It was just some sort of automated thing. Rottweiler, it was like an automated detection thing. So I filed a fair use thing. I'm sure the stream's going to be back. I'm not actually that worried about it. Sorry for that inconvenience. But this is what we're going to watch today, guys, because I am interested in the perspective here. And so that's what we're doing today. I got a couple other things before we get started. We are going to do beer because we're going to do beer. But I also want to talk about something else. I want to talk about, well, a couple things. Number one, please do make sure you're subscribed to my Substack. I'm sorry that my Substack has been a little light on content this week. Normally, I'm posting a lot more content on my Substack than I am this week. I do have things that I do want to write about. It's just been really hard for me to focus on this with all the stuff going on and just trying to follow that and wrap my head around it. So I do apologize, guys. But the content, there's tons of content there. There's probably lots of content on there that you haven't seen. So hey, when I'm having a slow week on content on the Substack, it is a great time to get caught up. You can check out the Woke Mind series. You can check out the Woke 101 series. I'm going to have some more stuff going up in the video vault, stuff like that. So you can find all that over at Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. This is my main content hub on the internet. And so if you're new to the channel, then go through the back catalog. I've got a lot of great content on that Substack that breaks down the woke ideology, explains it in plain English. I'm the only one covering a lot of the topics that are covered on the Substack, doing investigative reporting that no one else is doing. And if you want to support the work I'm doing, you can sign up for $8 a month or $80 for the year. You guys help keep me in business. I really do appreciate it. And so definitely check out the Substack for that. Tayton says, Trump didn't condemn white supremacy. You Palestinian supporters don't condemn Hamas. Even if you and Trump both did, LOL. Well, this is exactly it. It's like I've condemned Hamas on numerous occasions. I've called Hamas a terrorist organization. I've also acknowledged the truth that Israel created Hamas with how they treated the Palestinians. It didn't just poof up out of nowhere. When you oppress an entire people, these things happen. They should have fucking predicted it. So, while I do not in any way, shape, or form support or condone the behaviors of Hamas, I think it's awful and atrocious. And the people who perpetrated the attacks on Israel should absolutely be dealt with in the most severe possible way. I simply just don't think we should be genociding an entire people. I just don't think that's too much to ask. And I feel like we should be able to be adults and to say that. And apparently, that's just not allowed anymore. I appreciate that. Everyday therapist. Actually, let's talk about this real quick. This is a happy thing. I didn't know, is Sin here? So I wasn't going to say anything because I didn't know. This is going to have a happy moment, okay, guys? I didn't know if people knew about this. I didn't know if Sin wanted this public. Sin, one of the most valued member of the community, she got her kidney transplant. For those who don't know, she did post about it. Okay, good. Yes, Sin has gotten her kidney transplant. Hang on. I did hear from Sin this morning. She's resting. She's doing great. And so this is like I can't tell you. I got the text yesterday morning that Sin was going into surgery, and it was like the first thing I saw when I woke up in the morning. And Sin, for people who have never been to one of my community calls, when you support my work, either on Substack or Locals or Patreon, et cetera, you get invited to 2 community Zoom calls every single week. Sin is on those calls. She is just a wonderful, wonderful lady. She has been just one of the bedrocks of this community, has helped so many people, and Sin's needed a kidney transplant for a really long time. And so when I got the text yesterday morning that she was in surgery, I was so excited. I heard from her this morning. She's doing great. So let's everyone send prayers and happy thoughts to Sin on a quick recovery. She's waited for this a long time. She's done everything she needed to do to be healthy for it. And so, just really, that's the good news, a bright shining light. And I'm glad she posted about it, because I was like, it was killing me, because I was like, I didn't want to say anything publicly because I didn't know if she wanted it to be public. But it's just a really, really happy thing. So we're going to celebrate that. Another thing I want to let people know about: if you are a supporter on the Substack or on any of the other places, we do a weekly movie night. We do movie night at on Sundays at 8 p.m. where we watch a different movie, and sometimes we do a poll to see which movie we want to watch. Jennifer just posted in Locals not too long ago that there is a tiebreaker poll. So on Sunday at 8 p.m., we are either watching Tucker and Dale versus Evil or Beetlejuice. So go and cast your vote. You can vote in Locals, or you can vote in the supporter Discord. How do you get access to the supporter Discord, you ask? Well, I'm glad you did. You go to this here newsletter called the Unwoke Roundup, and when you scroll all the way down to the bottom, under this here red box, you will find a link to the supporter Discord. You will also find a Zoom link tomorrow at 3 p.m. We will be doing our weekly Bitchcraft call. Not weekly, monthly, sorry. Tomorrow at 3 p.m. we'll be doing our monthly Bitchcraft call. You can also find the link in the Substack for that, or I will be posting it on Locals, Patreon, all the other things as well. And so, those are the types of things that you do get access to when you support my work, which of course I really do appreciate. All right. Yes, Sin called the timing of this almost perfectly. Sin always thought it was going to be in fall, and it is in fall. So wonderful news there. Last thing I want to talk about is this. It has been confirmed in as best a way it can possibly be confirmed. So, what's funny? I feel like I'm in this place in my life where I just don't want to hate anyone. I really don't. I think the world is going to hell in a handbasket. I think that we are descending into the Marxist utopia. I really do. I think that I don't think there's a lot we can do to stop it, because I don't think there's the will to stop it. So I've kind of gotten to this place where I refuse to hate anyone. I effing refuse. I don't hate people on the far left. Hey, hang on. See, this is God saying, "Don't talk about this, Carlin. Don't talk about this." Whatever, God, I'll talk about what I want to. People on the far left and the far right, I have no interest in hating them anymore. Naruto says, last night I was scrolling through YouTube. Tim Pool decided to talk about Israel Gaza while he had Blair White on. Oh, well, I'm sure Blair White had many vapid things to say about it that weren't hinged into reality at all. But thank you, Naruto, for the super chat. So back to this. So I lately have been watching Nick Fuentes' analysis of the Israel-Palestine situation. Now, those longtime viewers of my channel know I keep an eye on Nick Fuentes. I am actually kind of afraid of what Nick Fuentes and his cult of groypers could turn into. For real, legitimately. And I have been for a while. And so every once in a while on this channel, we dabble in groypers and we watch some of Nick Fuentes' content, and then the groypers come into the chat and they put on a whole like show and all this stuff. And this has kind of like been just an ongoing thing. Hang on, some spammers trying to call me. There we go. And so I've never been like a Nick Fuentes fan. Like, and I think that this should be very clear. Anyone that has followed my content and has particularly watched the content where I've been watching Nick Fuentes and getting into shouting matches with the groypers that come into my chat, I have never been a fan of Nick Fuentes at all. The only thing I felt like I had in common with Nick Fuentes is that we both went to Boston University. That's it. And I wasn't actually really happy about that. I talked all the time about how like who are the people that went to Boston University? AOC, Nick Fuentes, and me. I was like, I don't know. I don't know what that says. But I do pay attention to what Nick Fuentes says because I've always thought that Nick Fuentes could actually grow into a problem because I do think he is very smart. I think that he's very wrong about a lot of things, but I do think he's very smart and he has a very committed group of people. And so when you're thinking about like the culture war stuff, I watch everyone from the far left to the far right. In the past week or so, I've run into a quandary though. In that, well, I mean, I guess this started probably a couple months ago when Yasmin is in the community, and I were like, we were joking on Twitter about how funny it is to go into spaces when Nick Fuentes is in those Twitter spaces when he has a sock account. And usually Nick Fuentes like really like says some crazy shit when he's in those spaces. And so it's like we were keeping an eye on his account to like know when we were going to get entertainment. And then Nick Fuentes followed me on Twitter. He followed me from his Apple account. And I was like, what's going on? And then as soon as he followed me from his Apple account, he got banned. And then he came back and he had the Purple Grimace account and I followed him from that. He followed me right back. And I was just like keeping an eye on him, like, what's going on? And then that account got banned too. And now he's back and he has a Bart Simpson account called Autumn Groiper. And this time he followed me first, and I didn't even know about it until like 2.5 days later because I wasn't paying attention, whatever. And so I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then it kind of happened to coincide. Well, yes, this is the punchline that we're leading to, John. Yes, he does. I'm actually convinced of this, and I'm going to explain why. And then the whole Israel-Palestine thing started. And I was like watching him and I was like, what's he going to say about this? Because anything involving the Jews, I was like, oh, Nick Fuentes is going to be off the chain on the Jewish stuff. Like Nick Fuentes is going to be like next goddamn level on the Jewish stuff. And so I was like really paying attention to what he was saying. And then we ran into a little bit of a problem because it turns out that Nick Fuentes, of all goddamn people, has become one of the voices of reason on the Israel-Palestine conflict. I know, I'm shocked as well. I was like watching his show and he was giving these nuanced takes. He was taking like a pretty decent line on Twitter with this stuff. He actually wasn't being crazy about the Jew stuff, not nearly as crazy as he could be. Let's just be honest. Like he could be going about 17 levels more than what he is right now. And I'm a little surprised by that. And I don't know what's going on, but I've been watching his show this week. That he usually starts. He always says it's going to be earlier and then it always ends up being at least a 45-minute wait because he's young and he doesn't know how clocks work. And so I've been watching his show this week, and last night I was watching it, and Nick Fuentes, I shit you not, he had a nuanced take about the situation that was not hateful, that was not evil, and which he actually said Israel has a right to exist. And I've heard him say that he wants Israel to stabilize relations with other countries in the region. I've heard him say he doesn't actually care about Palestine. He's not pro-Palestine. He's not pro-Israel. He's not pro-Palestine. I mean, his biggest fear seems to be that, like, we're going to get dragged into a war with Iran, which I was like, that's actually okay, Nick. That's actually a legitimate take. And so I've been kind of like watching this situation, and like the Groypers and I have had kind of, I've been calling it the unholy alliance. Like, where I'm saying stuff that they agree with, in like, I'm saying stuff on Twitter like, why am I being called an anti-Semite for questioning the fact that you guys are about to start a genocide? Like, I just don't think this is anti-Semitic. I think this, if anything, it's anti-genocide. I think everyone should be anti-genocide, but hey. And so I was like starting to say stuff on Twitter, like basically saying, I don't want to be called an anti Semite every time I question something a Jewish person does. And the Groypers would like it, and the Groypers would tweet it out, whatever. And so I have like this unholy alliance right now with the Groypers. It's like normally we don't get along, but for one rare moment, we've kind of come together. And I've kind of been playing with this. I'm like, maybe if I'm nice to the Groypers, maybe I can actually teach them some stuff that they're getting wrong about the left. Maybe I can teach them about socialism, like real socialism, not the bullshit that they see, like the real stuff that's going on, the scary stuff that we all see. Maybe I can teach them how whiteness isn't about skin color, it's about capitalism and private property. Maybe I can teach them about queer theory and where all this stuff comes from, and that it's not Jewish. Maybe, I'm not saying I can help all of them, but maybe if I'm playing a little bit nicer with the Groypers, they'll allow me to like show them some stuff that could, these are all young kids. They're fucking young. Okay? Like, I was like, okay, like, why not try to take advantage of this situation and do something with it, right? Like, let's play nice and just see what happens. Well, as all this was going on, Nick Fuentes was getting shit on by a lot of people on the right because Nick Fuentes was going at Ben Shapiro. Now, can we all agree? Can we just all get on the same page that Ben Shapiro has been a raving goddamn lunatic all fucking week? If I'm like, I don't care if anyone's Jewish, Ben Shapiro's like, you're an anti-Semite bigot. Like, he's being really facts don't care about Ben Shapiro's feelings this week. I'll tell you what. Ben Shapiro has lost the goddamn plot. I, by the way, would say exactly the same thing of Dave Rubin. I have lost all respect for Dave Rubin this week. I'm sorry. Dave Rubin, legitimately called for a protest to be censored because he didn't like someone's speech. Don't fucking call yourself a classical liberal when you're calling for the censorship of speech you don't like. And so the conservative Jews have lost the plot. They're raving lunatics in this entire situation. They're not listening to reason. They're calling everyone who disagrees with them an anti-Semite. I'm not cool with this, man. But where I really kind of was okay, everyone needs to sit the fuck down. I saw this tweet from Andrew Klavan. Andrew Klavan said, Ben Shapiro is my friend and I genuinely like him, and he doesn't need me to defend him from the likes of Nick Fuentes. In fact, I'd feel it'd be insulting to Ben to compare his intellect and ideas to whatever it is that comes out of Fuentes' face. But I am genuinely curious what anyone sees in Fuentes. The sniggering hatred of people, it makes my skin crawl. Then I was like, you have never actually listened to him. And I have a lot of indignation for people who shit on other people that they don't take the time to listen to. Listen, man, I will shit on the far left all day, every day. I spend dozens of hours a week shitting on the far left. But do you know what I also do? I also spend dozens of hours a week listening to the far left. I'm not just shitting on them willy-nilly. I am listening to their long-form content and then saying, this is a really bad idea, and I'm going to tell you why this is a bad idea. but the listening comes first. The shitting on them comes second. Like, I've been listening to Nick Fuentes. He's not saying anything hateful. He really isn't. I know this might be shocking to people who haven't listened to him lately. I know he said some shitty things in the past, which we're going to talk about in a second, but like, can we just like acknowledge that like right now, in this moment, he's not doing that, and that has to count for something. Andrew Clavin continues. Listen, I'm anything but a neocon. I opposed the war in Afghanistan after I was embedded there back in 2008. I have no problem debating where U.S. interests lie. It's my one and only foreign policy concern. But how a weaselly Jew hater like Fuentes represents America first or anything worthwhile is truly a mystery to me. Well, all that Nick Fuentes is saying right now is that he's not pro-Israel, he's not pro-Palestine, he thinks Israel has a right to exist and a right to defend itself. He also thinks that what's going on in Palestine is a genocide and that he doesn't want the US involved because he doesn't want the US getting dragged into a war with Iran. This is Nick Fuentes' position. I don't think this is Jew hating. I'm sorry. I don't think it's Jew hating to say the United States shouldn't be involved because we are going to get dragged into a war with Iran. But Andrew Clavin apparently does. Naruto says, maybe we can teach Nick Fuentes that it's okay to admit that he likes dick. You know, people like what they like. There's no shame. No shame. Clavin finishes, people keep saying to me, debate him. And all I can think is, debate him? I just want to scrape him off my shoe and move to the cleaner ground. Surely Americanism, patriotism, conservatism can all find better representatives than this. And so I responded, because I know the Groypers are going to amplify it now, because the Groypers like me at this for the briefest moment in time. The Groypers and I are in the unholy alliance. And I said this, hi, Andrew. I've listened to a lot of Nick Fuentes' analysis of Israel-Palestine, and the reality is this. He has been nuanced, not hateful at all, and has flatly said Israel has the right to defend itself. Nick Fuentes is right, and Ben Shapiro is wrong. I'm no Groyper. I've hate-watched Nick on more than one occasion. I have rarely been flattering in my assessment of him, and I spend most of my time listening to far-left socialists, and I think Nick Fuentes gets a lot wrong. He is not infallible. But maybe if we acknowledge what Nick gets right, then he might be open to considering new information on what he's getting wrong. I hope he lets me try to convince him someday, but right now is not that day. And I actually mean that too. At some point, when I feel ready to commit to such a thing, because I'm not there yet, I would actually like to have a conversation with him about what he's getting wrong about the race stuff and the queer stuff. And to show him receipts on what he's getting wrong from all of the deep dives that we've done, because I promise you, Nick, what is going on is actually much worse than what you think it is, bro. But that's not right now, okay? But I would have that conversation at some point in the future. Nick is 25 years old. His brain has just finished developing. Yes, he has said some stupid things, but how many stupid things did you say or do in college? And this is the thing. This is why, like, I'm feeling like after watching a lot of Nick Fuentes' analysis this week, like, the kid's 25 years old, bro. He's 25. Conservative influencers have been going on and on and on and on and on about how trans people shouldn't have trans surgery until they're at least 25 because the brain doesn't fully develop until you're 25. So Nick Fuentes said crazy shit in college when he was 18. Like, and you want to say that that's who he is for the rest of his life? I just don't think that's true, and I don't think it's actually fair. I don't think there's anything to admire about, what is Andrew Clavin, 60-something? What is there to admire about a 60-something-year-old man with 40 plus years more life experience than Nick Fuentes shitting on a 25-year-old? And he also has unpopular opinions. So what? Can't we allow for evolution? Don't we want people with bad ideas to change their minds? Guys, I'm going to break the news to you. Young people have a lot of really stupid ideas. They can, like, do we expect 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds to have the entire world figured out? Do we expect them to know everything? Then why are we not allowing them to grow and evolve from being a young, stupid kid? You guys are demonizing and vilifying a 25-year-old, and you wonder why he makes it a point to be a pain in the ass? You'll have to excuse me for not being impressed. Right now, Nick is doing better analysis than people twice his age. That's just fact and is observable from anyone who takes the time to listen. It wouldn't kill you to listen to people you disagree with, you know? Facts don't care about your feelings. It's really gross, honestly, like, when you think about it. Like, for people who are not even taking the time to listen to what they're investigating, vilifying someone on the internet, and maybe I say this maybe because I've been through this, man. I've been through this where people will vilify me for things I never said or things that never happened that were the fantasies of some fucking child. Maybe it hit like a nerve is all I'm saying. So I posted that on Twitter yesterday, and it made Nick happy. This is Nick's Twitter account. But here's my point. Going back to earlier, here's my point. I attract the oddest people. I really do. I don't know why. I have a whole caravan of people on the internet who come from odd and interesting places that don't necessarily align with where I am, but that end up having a crush on me for some reason or another. On the far left, we have Sophie Lewis, the ginger dragon, my abolish the family goddess. We know that Sophie totally wants me. All lesbians want me is just a thing. And that's cool, man. That's cool. I'm trying to get Sophie to come on the channel. I'm working very hard. But I've got that kind of like weird, interesting relationship going on the far left. And now, on the right, I'm absolutely convinced that Nick Fuentes has a crush on me. I'm absolutely convinced of it. This guy's been flirting with me on Twitter all week. And in the replies, when one of his groypers says, "You have a crush on Nick Fuentes," I said, "He has a crush on me. Look who liked it." Nick Fuentes liked this. Ha ha. Caught you, Nick. It's okay. Nick, you're allowed to have a crush on me. It's okay. It's all right. Maybe I was wrong in my initial assessment of Nick. Maybe he's actually bisexual. It is funny though. It is actually funny. I've talked about how like all lesbians have a crush on me. Like inevitably I have like lesbian vibe that like lesbians are drawn to me like moths to a flame, but it's not just lesbians. I also have a lot of bisexual men who are drawn to me. I don't know what it is, possibly because I've got like more masculine energy. And so it's okay, Nikki. It's all right. It's all right. We can play nice for now, bro. Let's just see what happens. All right, guys. With that said, we're going to get into our main show. But before we do that, I know I've already been talking for 40 minutes. Of course, this is happy hour, which means I need a beer. So what we do on happy hour is we have a tradition where I go to the craft beer store. I get 4 craft beers. I have maternal energy. Oh, no. Oh no. So what we do on happy hour is I go to the craft beer store. I get 4 craft beers. I tell you guys about the craft beers, and you guys get to pick out which one I drink first. Let me just grab my beers here. Bing. Now I'm not going to drink all the beers, but let's see what we have today. The first beer that we have is called Ambrosia Sour. This is from River Styx Brewing Company. River Styx Brewing Company does a lot of like really kind of thick, like decadent dessert beers, like Oreo beers and peanut butter stouts and all sorts of good stuff. And I'm excited to try this Ambrosia Sour because I've had one other Ambrosia beer and it was so good. It was an Edward Scissorhands beer. And let's see, does this have a description? A collaboration with our friends at Stormlong Hard Cider. This unique libation blends, wow, I can't speak. This unique libation, God damn it. This unique libation blends fresh apple cider and raspberry sour fermented with our house yeast and conditioned on crimson hibiscus. So that's going to be our first option today is the Ambrosia Sour. Second option is an old staple. I've had this one several times for happy hour, the Coconut Sizzle. I love this beer. It's so good. It's very coconutty. This would be the type of beer that I would have on a cruise with an umbrella in it. It is a sour ale brewed with coconut gelato, coconut, and marshmallow, and it is delicious. That is our second option. Our third option, hang on. Trying to make room. There we go. Our third option is from Great Nation Brewing Company. And it is going to be a strawberry shortcake tart ale, 6%. Let's see. Tart ale with strawberries and natural flavors. And there's no descriptions, but there is a delightful illustration of a bear on the front. And our last one is going to be, I had to get a pumpkin. I had to. And look at this can. It's called Virgil. You guys know I love a good can. Looks a little bit like Hitler. We can call this the Nick Fuentes beer. Virgil Pumpkin Ale. This is 6%. This is from Hobbs Brewing Company. This autumn ale is packed with the flavors of fall, brewed with pumpkin, graham crackers, spices, and vanilla, full flavored, but with a crisp and clean finish. So those are our choices today, guys, for the beer vote. We have Ambrosia Sour. We have Coconut Sizzle. We have, Strawberry Shortcake. Or we have Virgil Pumpkin Hitler Beer. There we go. Let me put the poll in the chat, and then we will get this party started. And while you guys are voting, I'm going to say hi to everyone watching over on Rumble. I'm going to pop out your chat as well so I can see you guys and interact with you. I know I haven't been doing a good job of it so far, but Maz, Kara, thank you guys for joining me over on Rumble. Please make sure you subscribe over there. Mount the like button for me, guys. And while you guys are doing that, let me just get the video set up so we can start this here show an hour into the stream. Yeah, I feel like I really gave the pumpkin an extra push by calling it the Hitler beer. Yeah, okay. You guys, the pumpkin's gonna win. The fucking Hitler beer's gonna win. This is the Groiper vote. The Groipers are here. The Groipers are voting for the Hitler beer. All right. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hitler beer it is, guys. The surprise contender. I really didn't expect that, but okay, whatever. Yeah. Hi, Nick. We know you guys are watching. It's okay. You don't have to announce yourself or anything. Just don't be dicks in my chat. All right. Now that we've had our fun, we're going to get down to business. Guys, we are watching Eliza Schaefer have a chat with Scott Horton over what's going on in Israel, Palestine. This was a couple days ago, so it's not the most up-to-date info. No, you are not allowed to write a fan fiction. No, veto. But I do want to get Scott Horton's take on the whole situation. And I think this is going to be really helpful for that. So let's get this party started.
We're not going to be having any flashy music today because this is a very important topic. If you guys haven't seen this, You see Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, released this footage of the bombing and the striking back.
Hang on. Apologize, Naruto. I did miss your super chat. I apologize. Naruto says Ben Shapiro has been acting like a social justice warrior leftist all week, engaging in identity politics. Yes, he has. They're like, you either agree with us or you're an anti-Semite. Go fuck yourself, bro. This is so stupid of the right. Because, if the right really wants to use the left's tactics by calling everyone that disagrees with them an anti-Semite, then you know what's going to happen? They're going to completely devalue the term anti-Semite, just like the left has completely devalued the term racist. It doesn't matter if you're called a racist anymore, because every time you disagree with the left, you're a racist over something, and so it doesn't actually mean anything. The right is doing the same thing to the term anti-Semite, so I don't even care anymore. They're going to call me an anti-Semite no matter what, so I don't care anymore.
Of what's going on currently in Gaza, which of course is land that we'll be talking about in the lower southwest corner of Palestine or Israel, depending on who you ask. My guest today is an expert on war and the effects, both good and bad, in the history of the subject. I encourage you to grab a pen and a piece of paper, maybe roll out your phone if you're going to be taking notes, because I'm hoping this is going to be as informative as possible. It is not the typical episode that we do. But we are going to be going into it. I'd like to welcome to the show Scott Horton. He is the director of the Libertarian Institute and editorial director of antiwar.com. Welcome to Nightly Offensive.
Nightly Offensive, that's what he's calling it now. That's funny.
Yeah, so let's just, before we even jump into this, why don't you give us a little background about who you are, what your expertise is about, and why someone like myself would invite you onto a show to talk about such a controversial topic that no one seems to be able to get right.
Well, I'm a libertarian, which means I'm not a partisan. So I try to be fair. Obviously, I'm not objective. I have my own point of view, but I'm not a partisan. And, basically, I'm just a typical anti-government guy. And starting at a young enough age, I guess, I've never been a leftist or a conservative of any kind, or a liberal or any of those things. I've pretty much always been a libertarian and anti-government. And I guess I specialize in foreign policy because of the lesson that you can't have a limited republic and a world empire at the same time. And the reason that our government is so big is first and foremost because of our role as the global hegemon. And so if you're going to have a limited government and a free society at home, step one would be to abandon your world empire. And so that's really been my focus all this time. I've written a couple of books about it, Fool's Errand about Afghanistan, and enough already about the entire war on terrorism. And basically, I'm just a Ron Paul guy. Oh, and I've done 6,000 interviews since 2003. Some, I guess, low hundreds of which have been concerning Israel-Palestine. And I've been the editor of antiwar.com for about 20 years. So I wouldn't, I don't have a PhD. I wouldn't personally claim to be an expert, although people say that about me. But I do have some things to say about this that I guess, Elijah, the shorter answer to your question would be, I feel like I can fill in some gaps in the narrative, answer some questions for you about who's who and what's going on here, that hopefully will help you understand the situation better, rather than make it simply more obscure or be just some more cheerleading for one team or another.
That's incredible. And, obviously we're seeing these images come out today of the counteroffensive for the special operation, right? Which Russia was not allowed to do in Ukraine, but Israel is fully capable and warranted in doing. This is a young child's body.
I just want to say something, because Elijah said that Russia was not allowed to do this in Ukraine. This is another thing that has really, really, really bothered me about this entire situation. Most of you guys know, if you're a regular on my channel, you know this. My husband is Ukrainian, from Ukraine. My husband has family in Ukraine. My husband's brother is in the Ukrainian army right fucking now. My husband's family's house got damaged when Russia was indiscriminately firing bombs into my husband's family's city. And even with all of that, my line on Ukraine from the very, very, very beginning of all of this was that the U.S. should not be involved in any way. Because you know what? I'm a fully grown adult and I can separate my family's personal stuff that's going on and have a lot of sympathy for the situation and understand that and still say that the greater good is that America does not get involved. That is what adults do, Ben Shapiro. And for all of the epic amount of shit that I took for having a Ukrainian name, or for pointing out that my brother-in-law is in the Ukrainian army, or if, God forbid, for about a week I had a Ukrainian flag in my profile when my family is literally from Ukraine. I took epic amounts of shit for this. My line on it is that the US shouldn't be in it from the very beginning, even if I had a Ukrainian flag in my profile, because my husband is goddamn from there. And now you're telling me, conservatives, that I have to bend the knee to your bullshit because you couldn't because you couldn't resist enacting a fucking genocide on Palestine? Like, my family has literally been at war since the entire fucking thing started in Ukraine. And no one cares about that. There's no sympathy for that. There's no sympathy for anyone that has anyone involved, but I'm supposed to bend the knee and do whatever Israel fucking wants, even if it's genociding an entire people. Fuck right off. None of you are principled. None of you, all these people who claim to be anti-war when it came to Ukraine, none of these people actually meant that they were anti-war. It was just anti-war when it was convenient for them to be anti-war. And then as soon as it's not convenient for them to be anti-war, they're like, genocide, bro. That's really bothered me. And it's been honestly really eye-opening.
Is being taken from the rubble. And so this is a conflict that's taking real lives in real time. We're already into the thousands, and I figure this is going to continue to rise. Before we do talk about this show is completely demonetized on YouTube for talking about a lot of things just like this. In fact, we're not demonetized for breaking or violating any rules. We are demonetized for covering the events on January 6th under a journalistic license. And that's the threat that they pose, because we were showing a counterproductive footage that was breaking the narrative early on. They didn't like that. But thankfully, we do have sponsors of the show. So a shout out to our sponsor of the show, Bambi. This is a shout out to everybody who has a small business, or if you know someone who does, I have to tell you a situation.
No commercials, no commercials, no commercials.
Talk about the history, the present conflict, where this will head, and what the solutions can be. Let's get into the show.
Oh, God.
Is about to even access in and out of the place. So this is absolutely crazy. Before we go into the history of anything that was going on, can I just bring up the obvious of what's happening here? Is this a normal precedent for a nation when attacking another territory or occupied territory to be cutting off access to water, electricity, and the basic necessities to live as they assault like this? Is this standard in U.S. or in global policy, or is this something that different? Can you explain to me what's going on?
Well, certainly in Iraq War I, America attacked the waterworks, and in the American-backed Saudi and UAE war against Yemen that Obama started in 2015, they certainly attacked the waterworks there. I think the real lesson for us here is the way that they say it, right? We're not talking about an airstrike or something. They shut it off. What does that tell you? It tells you right away, Gaza is not any kind of sovereign territory. In fact, you had trouble defining it there a second ago. What is it? It's occupied.
This is the other thing. It's like, why is it so fucking easy? Like, people in my Twitter feed all week have been like, every time I say Gaza's an open air prison, Gaza's an open air prison, Gaza's an open air prison, people are like, what are you talking about, Carlin? It's not a prison. You're lying. You're spreading propaganda. I'm like, oh yeah? Well, if it's not an open air prison, then why can Israel so easily turn off their power and their water and their food supply and their gas supply? Why can they do that? Because Israel has quite literally blockaded them.
territory. What it is it's an Indian reservation full of a bunch of refugees, people who already have been conquered for generations, who are locked up in there, and who have no water resources of their own. They're not allowed to. Israel controls everything.
They're not
Israel controls their
allowed to.
electricity, controls their travel. They have no seaport, no airport. They're prisoners there.
And you mentioned they're prisoners, so we got to talk about the history here, because depending on who's funding the history of Israel, right? If you're looking at like PragerU, for
Thank you,
instance, you're
Groiper.
obviously going to get a
Tell
extremely
Nick it's
Zionist,
okay that he has a crush on me.
background
We all
what's going on,
understand.
and it's going to be in favor of Israel. Sometimes you see different, historical videos or animations online that are showing Gaza's perspective or from the perspective of Palestinians that make Israel seem like the ultimate aggressor and evil. So I want to try to get an unbiased perspective. Let's jump into the history. So how do we get the Gaza Strip and the West Bank? How do we go from people living and cohabitating a land to these separate regions? Let's talk about that.
Okay, so it's a long and complicated story, but to try to make it short, essentially what happened was the Zionist project had been going on since the late 19th century, and there were Jews more and more from Europe, Ashkenazi Jews from Europe, moving there in the time before World War I and after. But then after World War II, there were, many, I guess millions, 3 or 4 million European Jewish refugees who left Europe and went to Palestine. And rather than trying to, live in a land with, say, separation of church and state and equal rights for everyone, or some kind of binational state, they wanted to create an exclusivist Jewish state for themselves. And that meant that the Palestinian Arabs and Christians had to go. And so in 1947 began what's called the Nakba by the Palestinians. It means the catastrophe. The Israelis call it the founding of Israel. And they push this myth. And it's funny because you get people to repeat this. They have all these little slogans. Was a land without people for a people without land. Does that really make sense? The eastern shore of the Mediterranean Sea hadn't been settled, right? When, yeah, it had. Of course, we know it all had, that people lived there all along. And what had happened was they had to essentially cleanse what they call now ethnic cleansing, which is, I believe, a term coined from the wars in Yugoslavia. But they cleansed 750,000 people from their homes and who were never allowed to return. And at the time, and you'll hear reference to this by the Zionists, of course, well, the UN had this partition plan that said that Israel could have their own Jewish state there. Well, first of all, the UN General Assembly has no authority to create a state for anyone. All that was a recommendation. But that same recommendation was to create two states, that the Palestinians would have a state too. But what happened was the Israelis made a secret deal with the king of Jordan. Even though in the 48 war, we get it short,
This guy is one of the leading experts in what he does in the entire country, so I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss him.
The lesson short and sweet. Well, Israel was attacked by Syria, Jordan, and Egypt, and defeated them all, thank goodness, and so was able to have their state. But part of that was they didn't really fight the king of Jordan. They made a separate deal with him that he could keep the West Bank. And then made it, I don't know if they made a deal with the Egyptians until after the war, that they would keep the Gaza Strip. So the Palestinians would be mostly herded into those two territories, but would never have their state, would be under the domination of a neighboring state. And this created inside what is called Israel proper, or within the 67 borders, will be another term for it, what was an 80-20 super duper Jewish majority, right? So that meant that they could be a democracy and a Jewish state. And even though 20% of the population was Palestinian, Muslim, or Christian, they were only 1/5. And so they could essentially appeal to the Americans as being, a democratic country, like a Western European country or a Western country, and stay in our good graces for that part of it. And so my point being there, I'm trying to be descriptive, forget, the atrocities that took place during the Nakba and all of that, just for time's sake. But the important point here, Elijah, being that what they created was sustainable, right? They created an 80-20 super duper majority Jewish state. So regardless of how it got that way, it was, obviously the Palestinians were in refugee camps all over the place, and it was terrible for them. But my point being that what really changed, and I think what's really of note for people to understand the situation, was the situation after the war in 1967. Because in 1967, that was when Israel started it, although they blame it on Egypt, but put that to the side. They fought again, Egypt, Jordan, and Syria, and beat them all. And in this case, they took the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. And especially they want the West Bank. They call it, especially the religious right in Israel, calls it Judea and Samaria, and say that they have, this supernatural title to this land that, of course, outweighs any natural rights that the Palestinians might have. The Gaza Strip, I think, means less to them. They did have settlers there for a time, although, well, I'll hold that point to a second. I'll get back to the settlers in Gaza in a second. But in 67, essentially what I'm trying to tell you is Israel de facto annexed the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. And they cleansed another couple of 100,000 people from Israel into the West Bank. But the point is they kept all those people, right? Whereas in 48, they had cleansed the territory. Here they took more territory, but they kept millions of people, essentially kidnapped them all. And now they don't know what to do with them, right? Is the source of this whole crisis. So in Camp David in 1979, when Jimmy Carter and Brzezinski made the deal where Israel made peace with Egypt, they also promised to create a two-state solution, to give up the West Bank and the Gaza Strip to allow the Palestinians to have their own separate independent state there. And then essentially nothing happened all through the 1980s, although George Bush Sr. did put...
Hang on. Eric says, seems like we're trapped between a 1400-year blood feud, like buying land right smack in between Hatfields and McCoys. I agree with this. Listen, I said from the very, like my initial take on this whole thing was, I don't care. I am not pro-Israel. I am not pro-Palestine. I think that this was inevitable. I think that I don't like the way that Israel has treated Palestine. And because of that, I think that made this inevitable. But at the end of the day, I don't really care. Not my monkeys, not my circus. It wasn't until people told me that it wasn't just, it's not enough for you to not be pro-Palestine. You have to be pro-Israel, that I started to fucking care. And now I'm like, now I am where I am. But I agree. It's like, this is part of the reason we shouldn't be involved in this. This is not our business at all. When is the third debate, Tayton? Is that coming up? I have no idea. Number 2, thank you for the super chat. Israeli tanks have started their advancement towards Gaza, according to Mario on Twitter. Guys, I want to recommend everyone follow Mario on Twitter. Mario, I don't know how to say the last name, but like his team is actually doing a really great job of like providing real-time updates of what is going on. They're vetting stuff, they're confirming stuff before they put it out. Oh, by the way, did anyone see that now CNN has officially retracted that story of the 40 beheaded babies? The story that was pushed by conservative shills all over the goddamn internet saying, we swear, we swear, we swear, trust me, bro. Now CNN has come out and says, yeah, there's really just like, there was no evidence of that. There was no confirmation of that. We can't confirm that because it never happened.
Push for this at the Madrid conference. And this is part of what got him unelected, by the way. And he complained, hey, I'm just one guy up against all these lobbyists up here. And he later complained that the Israel lobby helped to sabotage his reelection in 1992.
Yeah.
Because he had crossed them by insisting, riding high on the popularity of
the rule for people who are new is when I am right and you're wrong, you owe me $2. So everyone pay up. Everyone who thought that 40 beheaded baby story was real, $2 in the chat right now. It's the honor system, but still.
Iraq War I, on insisting that they would draw their settlers who were illegally colonizing the West Bank and start to implement this two-state solution. Well, Bill Clinton came in, and in 1993, he did sign the Oslo Accord. Remember Arafat shaking hands with Yitzhak Rabin on the White House lawn in that famous picture. And this Oslo Accord, what it said was that Israel would eventually get out of the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and allow them to have independence and a Palestinian state. Now, Rabin didn't really mean that.
So here's the thing, and this is another thing that I've been hearing from people in the Twitter spaces. And again, I've been listening to a variety of Twitter spaces. I've been listening to the pro-Israel ones. I've been listening to the pro-Palestine ones. I've been listening to the ones that are just reporting the news and are trying really, really hard to be even-handed. But like one thing that has come up has been very clear: is Israel committed to not pulling this bullshit, and then they did. So Israel committed that they were going to leave them alone, that they weren't going to try to take any more of the Palestinians' land, and then, oh wait, not only did they not leave them alone, but things got worse and they tried to take more of their land. So why can't we say that? Israel did not stand by the commitments that Israel made to Palestine. And you think that's not going to piss people off after a while?
What he thought of as a Palestinian state is not what you or I would call a Palestinian state, but it's a hell of a lot more independence than they have now. But as you may know, in 1995, a right-wing, frankly, a Netanyahu fan, Likud party follower, settler from the West Bank, murdered Yitzhak Rabin, and he was replaced by Shimon Peres and then Ehud Barak and Netanyahu, and then Barak, and then Sharon, and now, of course, after Olmert, Netanyahu again. But so the deal was dead. They never did.
Well, recollections may vary, Brian, but the fact is that they made commitments that they had no intention of following through on. So maybe they shouldn't have made the commitments if they had no intention of following through on it.
Make the two-state solution. And there's a mythology, which some of your listeners may be familiar with, and they may be objecting right now, that everybody knows that the Israelis tried to give Yasser Arafat a Palestinian state in the year 2000, at Camp David. But that's not true. And this guy, Robert Malley, who you may know, he's in trouble now. He's scandalous now because he's been Biden's envoy to Iran, or some kind of Middle East envoy dealing with Iran over there. But he was one of the negotiators at Camp David in 2000. So that's not true. The Israelis never even got around to making an actual offer at all. You can read all about it in The Guardian and in the New York Review of Books on that. So they said, again, the Israelis, their public relations machine comes up with these cliches. They say, everybody repeat it. Everybody say it along with me. The Palestinians never miss an opportunity to miss an opportunity. Right? Which is just, it's not true, but it's just a thing that you say, and it's a cliche and people say it, so it must be right. That, geez, and just think about how ridiculous that is. Yeah, every time we try to give them their own country, they refuse to accept it. Yeah, please, right? It's not true. So then here's another important.
I feel like we're seeing this play out in real time right now. This always struck me as it never made sense to me. Now that Scott Horton is saying this, it never made sense to me every single time I heard that, we tried to give them their own country and they just didn't want it. And it was always their fault. Everything was always their fault. It was always Palestine's fault. Can we just use common sense here for a moment? When you're in a fight with someone, is it always the other person's fault? Entirely, 100%, and you are just the completely innocent victim? No, that's not the way it works. There are two sides to every story. There are different perspectives, and most of the time, the truth is somewhere in the middle. Well, Mark, I'm not going to have a whole lot of sympathy for them since at the moment, Israel is executing a genocide of the fucking Palestinians. Naruto, you can't be pro-Palestine. You have to be actively anti-Palestine. That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Naruto. Thank you. But it never made sense to me why Every single negotiation only fell apart because Palestine. Israel had nothing to do with it. Israel, of course, wasn't keeping its commitments to Palestine to begin with, but that wasn't Israel's fault. That was Palestine's fault. Everything was Palestine's fault, and there was no sort of nuance to any of it. And now what Scott Horton is saying is like, yeah, that's not actually what happened, bro.
Important gimmick where we get back to Gaza is in 2005. Prime Minister Ariel Sharon pulls the Israeli settlers out of Gaza. Again, it's not as important to the Israelis as the West Bank is, and there were fewer Israeli settlers there. In fact, my friend Eric Garris, the real boss at antiwar.com, he predicted at the time this is going to be worse for the poor people of Gaza because those Israeli settlers were essentially protecting them as human shields de facto from the worst of what the Israeli government can dish out against them. And that proved to be absolutely insightful and a portent. And then here's what happened.
This entire thing is making me actually detest everyone associated with Israel. I really hope people like I like if this makes me like I started out this week not giving a flying fuck if people are Jewish. Like this whole situation and seeing the constant apologism for Israel and the way they're behaving, the constant apologies, the constant rationalizations, the calling of Palestinian of monsters and subhumans, the constant calls for Gaza to be turned into a parking lot. This is actively making me like not only disbelieve every single thing that every single pro-Israel person is telling me. It's making me actively detest Israel and the Jews. I really, like, honestly, I'm actually becoming one of those people. I'm actually becoming one of those people that's like, fuck you, Zionists. All because of this. Again, I started out the week not caring. But seeing the behavior of these people, the constant obfuscations, the constant deflections, the constant rationalization, the lies and the propaganda and the calls for genocide and not even caring that a genocide is like right about to occur in hours. They will probably start their genocide tonight before we're even done this stream. And no one seems to care. And if I say that, then I'm an anti-Semite. Well, fucking fine. I don't care anymore. If I become an if I'm an anti-Semite, it's because you assholes made me one.
Lisa Rice and George Bush insisted in 2006. They said, well, the Israelis don't have to deal with terrorists who are unelected, meaning Arafat and the PLO or PLA, Fatah. They don't have to deal with them. They're not elected. And we believe in democracy. We're the George W. Bush administration. We're all about democracy. So first, they have to stand for election, and then the Israelis can negotiate with them. But then, and I don't know if this was deliberate or not, depends on how cynical you are, you guess. But the Israelis really rigged the election against Arafat's party and for Hamas. And the way that they did that was they're, again, in control of these occupied territories. This is not the country next door, Palestine. This is the occupied territory.
I'm sorry, what? The Israelis rigged the election in favor of Hamas? Let's rewind. I'm sorry, what, Scott Horton?
They don't have to deal with them. They're not elected. And we believe in democracy. We're the George W. Bush administration. We're all about democracy. So first, they have to stand for election, and then the Israelis can negotiate with them. But then, and I don't know if this was deliberate or not, depends on how cynical you are, you guess. But the Israelis really rigged the election against Arafat's party and for Hamas. And the way
the Israelis rigged the election in favor of Hamas. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. All right. So all those times that I've said in the last 24 hours on Twitter that Israel created Hamas,
that they did that was they're, again, in control of these occupied territories. This is not the country next door, Palestine. This is the occupied territory.
Yeah, so can I pause you there for a second? Because that's what someone was saying today. So, like, I understand that the U.S. and its greatest allies typically have the most fair and free elections in the world. We just had one in 2020 that was pretty remarkable. Even out here in Australia, they love doing very fair and free things like, the election committee out here on the day before the vote literally said, "Hey, by the way, it's true. People can double vote, and we have no way of telling if they've double voted, but you shouldn't double vote. But if you are going to double vote, we can't track you." And you see this sort of like interference. There's a referendum going on out here in all these Western countries where people then
Crazy.
go, well, people in Gaza and these people, continue to elect terrorists, or in these elections, they all support these people, et cetera. And I go, I just don't believe that we can really take elections to explain anything in these countries anymore, because I don't
Yeah,
trust elections at
it's a
all. And so
great
you're
point.
saying that Israel and these people were working to rig the elections. I feel like, so this is a universal global problem, in my understanding, in these democratic states, that these elections are just rigged, and there's really maybe nothing we can do about it. Is that what you're saying, or is that today the same thing?
Well, I'll leave that part to you. I mean, clearly there are problems with elections all over the place, and observers got to do their best and all that. But in this specific case, what happened was they control all the tax revenue. And if they don't give the tax money to the government to distribute for goods and services, then they don't have it. And so that was what they did in the lead up to the election, was they just starved Fatah, and which gave the advantage to Hamas. Now, a short history of Hamas is that the Mossad deliberately helped to facilitate their rise and even directly finance their rise.
Yo. OG Nick, thank you for tagging me in this on Twitter. So I'm not going to show this on the screen because it's legitimately awful. And I really wish I hadn't seen this, but there is a picture of it on Twitter from Suleiman. The beheaded baby evidence has been provided. Palestinian children have been beheaded by Israel IDF soldiers. We were never given proof of beheaded Israeli babies because it was fake news, but I have been sent these photos from Palestine, which were provided by a journalist on the ground, and I'm looking at it right now, and it is a beheaded baby. It's on Twitter. I'm not going to show it on YouTube. I will retweet it so it'll be at the top of my feed. And you can go and judge for yourself.
In order to create a right-wing religious alternative to the PLO, so that, and here's my footnotes: Richard Sale in the UPI and Andrew Higgins in the Wall Street Journal, both right-leaning publications. And I don't know if Higgins is a right-leaning author. I think he is. Right-leaning reporters and right-leaning publications there. Again, that's Richard Sale and UPI and Andrew Higgins in the Wall Street Journal. That they did this so that they wouldn't have to make peace. So they could constantly say, oh no, look at how bad Hamas is for being, and this is, in fact, this isn't why they originally created it.
Again, Mark, I know that you don't like what he's saying right now, but he is one of the leading experts in the country on the topics that he's an expert in. So I wouldn't be too quick to dismiss. And you are welcome to go and ask him for proof, and I'm sure he'll provide it.
Originally created just to kind of divide and conquer a bit. But once Hamas got really bad after the first intifada, Richard Sales says, quoting CIA, they kept going anyway. They said, even though these guys do suicide attacks and stuff, we still want to keep them going because they make a great scapegoat to point at, right? So then this is what happened. You might guess that they deliberately rigged the election. You could also say it was an accident, that they were taking it out on Arafat for whatever reason, and this backfired by helping Hamas in the election. I don't know the answer to that for sure, but I can tell you this. There's another great article you need to look up. It's by David Rose in Vanity Fair. Yes, I admit it's in Vanity Fair, but it's a solid piece of journalism. You should look at it. It's called The Gaza Bombshell. And it's about how, so what happened in the election was Hamas won, but just barely. So they had to create a coalition government. But then America, Israel, and Egypt teamed up to do a coup d'etat. And they poured in a bunch of weapons to the Fatah group in Gaza, which they used to attack Hamas and tried to take on Hamas. And Hamas destroyed them and won. And only then did they take full control over the Gaza Strip. And then the Israelis put them under total siege. As you said at the intro to the show, they're going to put them under a total siege. My friend, they've been under total siege for 16 years. They've been under siege.
Was it
there.
necessary though? Because I need to stop you here for a second.
Sure.
Because like I hate talking about Israel, and I'll just be completely honest with you. I hate it because it's like talking to a 60-year-old about Russia. You know, when you're trying to just have a genuine conversation, it's like those freaking communists, and you're like, dude, just okay, we're in a different era, we're in a different time, and I'm trying to have a discussion about a specific conflict, Ukraine versus Russia. Can we please let the Cold War go for a second? We can talk about it. It can affect today, but can you just try to put your mind into the present, okay? Please. And with Israel, it's the same thing. I've had a few prominent people unfollow me that I was friends with, that even helped me when I went independent to, like, you know, get good contracts and go out, that unfollowed me simply because I just wouldn't, like, head over heels start lusting for the blood of innocent lives. I'm not joking. This is like, I've lost friends.
I have had a ton of people unfollow me over me not bending the knee to this bullshit. And you know what? Fine. And I have blocked. My fuse is getting so low. If you come into my feed and all you're doing is spouting propaganda, then you will probably get blocked pretty quickly, because I don't want to hear it. I really don't want to hear it. And just like people have lost their damn minds over all of this, and it's so upsetting to see how this is turning people into, like, I mean, listen, and again, I've never been one of those people that's like, you know, the Zionists. I have never been one of those people. Never really thought there was anything to it. But seeing how people are reacting to this, and how they have thrown all sense of logic and nuance out the window, how they refuse to look at evidence, how they refuse to acknowledge that this 40 decapitated babies thing was an out-and-out lie from the very goddamn beginning, how they refuse to acknowledge how they refuse to acknowledge. I am not going to see you bullshitting in my chat the entire time. If you want evidence, Mark, you can go to his fucking website and you can find it. See, this is the problem. Is people like Mark don't want to fucking listen. Go to his fucking website and look for the evidence. OG Nick, thank you for sticking to your principles no matter what. I truly never thought that following where the truth goes would be so difficult. Really never occurred to me. And I have to ask, I mean, I do. It's like, why can't we talk about anything related to the Jews? I was canceled very badly almost 2 years ago because I made an analogy about the Holocaust and Hitler in the midst of a 2-hour conversation about spirituality that really had nothing to do with the Jews. It had nothing to do with them at all, because the analogy I was making literally applied to every single person on the planet, whether you're Jewish or not. But because I made an analogy involving the Holocaust and Hitler, this is when I should have known something was wrong. When something was taken out of context from a 2-hour spiritual conversation, which is not about facts, it's about faith, it's about perspectives in the world, it's about philosophy. When that was taken out of context to make me look like an anti-Semite, when what I was saying quite literally applied to every single person on the planet, I should have known something was up then. I really should have. Because the backlash that I got from that was so disproportional from what actually happened. And now I'm looking at the situation and I'm like, maybe there is something to this. Maybe there really is something. Like, we're not allowed to talk about the Jews. We're not allowed to talk about the Holocaust. We're not allowed to question anything Israel does. In fact, if we don't come in full-throated support of everything Israel does, we're anti-Semites. We're not allowed to question what is obviously and clearly political propaganda. We're not allowed to call out a genocide that's about to happen. Like, and every single conservative influencer is just going along with this, and people who previously were rational human beings have just lost their fucking minds. Why is that happening? Maybe there is something to the idea that they're bending the knee to a highest power, thy name be Jew. I don't know. But if people are not bending the knee to what Israel want and the Jews want, then why are they doing it? What other explanation is there of their completely unhinged and ridiculous behavior? Maybe the people who talk about the Zionist conspiracies were right all along. I don't know.
More friendships
Yeah,
over
bad.
not jumping in this. So I hate it because unlike some people who don't do this for a living, it fucking blows because I actually like some of these people and now I lose them as friends simply for my opinions. People are really sensitive about Israel and Palestine too. People are really like, if you don't take one.
Hang on. Chad is saying this too. It's not even that they're calling you an anti-Semite anymore. Ben Shapiro and Dave Rubin, I've seen Dave Rubin do this too. They're flat out calling people Jew haters. I have never cared if someone's Jewish in my life. How can I possibly be a Jew hater? I have literally never fucking cared if someone was a Jew in my entire life.
One direct side of things, then you're always the enemy. So I'm not trying to be careful here, but from your perspective, then Hamas taking over and getting control, it looks like other nations didn't want this to happen. It looks like Israel didn't want this to happen. Can you objectively tell us if you think Israel was correct in the way that they've changed their relationship with their checkpoints, with the walls, with cutting down crossings, with the sea blockade, etc.? Were they correct in this, or is this an overreaction?
Here's
like,
the
what's
thing,
going
man.
on?
Well, so remember, they promised that they would give the Palestinians independence, but they didn't mean it, right? So when here, I have this quote for you. Let me share this quote with you. It's very telling. This is from when they pulled out of Gaza in 2005.
What did he say, philosophist?
You know what? I'm sorry. I don't have the whole quote, but I can paraphrase it for you. What it is it's Dov Weissglass is the guy's name, and he was an advisor to Ariel Sharon. And people were criticizing them and saying, hey, listen, how can you give up Gaza? How can you give up any territory to these terrible terrorists and blah, blah? And Weissglass says, no, you don't understand, see. The reason we're doing this unilateral withdrawal, not part of any negotiation, we're just withdrawing the way we're doing it, is because this freezes the peace process. It puts the peace process in formaldehyde. Everyone put that in your search engine. It puts the peace process in formaldehyde. In other words, it's sabotage, pretending to be magnanimous. Oh, look, we're withdrawing from our occupation of Gaza. Well, they're still keeping it under total control from the outside. And then they rig it, again, I don't know, accidentally on purpose or what, so that now they have Hamas in there. And then I have another quote from you. This is only from 2 years ago. And the guy who said this, Elijah, is currently the finance minister. Okay, this guy is one of the top members of Benjamin Netanyahu's government from the religious Zionist party. And he said this just 2 years ago. He said, listen, the PA, that is Fatah, the secular commie PLO, Yasser Arafat types in the West Bank. He says the PA is a liability and Hamas is an asset. On the international playing field, in this game,
prove that Israel isn't currently enacting a genocide against Palestine. I can play this game both ways, Gene. Why don't you prove that Israel is not currently enacting a genocide against Palestine? Walter, who has never been on this channel before, I'm really sorry you don't understand Israel's founding its history. I'm sorry that you just don't understand. I'm sorry that you don't understand, Carlin, why it's anti-Semitic for you to question anything we say or do. I'm sorry that you don't understand why we just had to oppress those Palestinians. They're just animals. They're subhuman. I'm so sorry you don't understand that Palestinians are not human, Carlin. We had to build a fence around them. We had to control all their food and water and their internet and everything that they're doing. I'm sorry that we had no choice. They're subhuman monsters, Carlin. I'm so sorry that you don't understand this. Is that about right, Walter? Did I get that right? Based on the UN definition of genocide. And you're deflecting. Don't think I don't fucking know you're deflecting.
Of the delegitimization. Think about it for a second. The PA is a liability and Hamas is an asset. It's a terrorist organization. Nobody will recognize it. Nobody will give it status at the ICC, and nobody will let them push resolutions at the UN. And then we'll need, and we won't need an American veto, or leaving us where we would need an American veto, and we won't need one. And I'm sure at all that that given the current situation, given the current facts, that the central playing field we're playing in is international there. Abu Mazen, that's Abu Abbas, the leader of Fatah, he's costing us serious casualties, in other words, in a public relations sense. And Hamas in such...
Isn't it funny that literally all I'm doing on this stream is listening to a foreign policy expert? Why don't the Jews want Scott Horton to be able to share his perspective? I'm honestly asking. Because literally all I'm doing on this stream is listening to, well, no, there doesn't, Gene, because you're deflecting, and I'm not going to have this conversation with you right now because you're literally in my chat trying to deflect from Scott Horton, which I don't think is very polite. Literally all I'm trying to do is listen to an expert analysis on this situation, and I do consider Scott Horton to be an expert, and I don't think that there is any there's no argument that you can make that is going to lead me to the conclusion that Scott Horton is not an expert. So why don't the Jews want me to listen to Scott Horton? Why don't the Zionists want me to listen to Scott Horton? Is this actually the line of questioning I need to go down now? Why are they coming into the chat and just saying, well, you just don't understand, okay? If you don't agree, fine. But don't fucking come into my chat and say, well, you just don't understand. If you want to offer a different perspective, then you can fucking come with some fucking receipts. In other news, Jim Jordan has received the votes to be nominated for Speaker. Well, that's good news. Scott Horton is a libertarian. He works with the Libertarian Institute. He edits antiwar.com. There's basically no one smarter on the planet on these issues than Scott Horton.
Situation would be an asset. And then here's the imperial hubris, right? I don't think we need to be afraid of that, Hamas, because the question was, what about the danger of Hamas taking over? And he says, oh, I don't think we need to be afraid of that Hamas could pose us any serious harm. But you see what a great benefit it is to have these Islamist right-wing extremists running around so that we can say, again, with the Israeli cliche, everyone say it with me, we have no partner for peace. We have no partner for peace. That's the mantra. Because look, Israel created Hamas. And then Israel put them in charge in the Gaza Strip. And then Israel bombs them, and then they commit heinous acts. We didn't get to talk about exactly what happened on the ground over the weekend, but they absolutely have committed war crimes, massacring innocent people. No question about that. And then the Israelis say, oh, no, see, why does this keep happening to us? Right? When they're the ones who create the situation. So what you're asking, your question to me was, so, well, once they put Hamas in charge in Gaza, what else were they supposed to do? Well, what they were supposed to do was give up a Palestinian state, let them have independence, or give them equal rights. And let's get real. If they tore down the fence.
Hang on. Let's get this super chat from Rottweiler. Thank you, Rottweiler. The argument for the withdrawal of Afghanistan being sabotage instead of incompetence seems more plausible now. Neocons need an excuse to remain there. I'm not sure I'm 100% there with you on Rottweiler, but I can understand that perspective. Yeah, Scott Horton's great. Again, this is not an area that I usually spend any time on because I do so much with the socialism shit, but like if this is your thing and if this is your thing, then Scott Horton is a wonderful resource of information and I would definitely encourage everyone to check him out. Again, he's the editor of antiwar.com, so that's kind of pretty self-explanatory, isn't it?
Give them equal rights. And let's get real. If they tore down the fence and said, okay, you're all Israeli citizens now. Everyone has Israeli citizenship and Israeli property rights and voting rights and every other thing. It wouldn't be nothing at all for the IDF to disarm Hamas and Islamic Jihad as, what are they? They're militias. They're not a state army. A state army can go in there and disarm them. And especially if you're giving them equal rights and letting them live there, war's over. That's doable. And then just like with American Indians, we don't fear American Indians here because they don't have any military power anymore. Their military power has been disarmed. They can be American citizens or they can live on the reservation, up to them, right? But we don't get to keep bombing their reservation and then calling them terrorists forever, fighting back against us.
Well, so the only bombing that happens on reservations is my bank account when I go to their casinos and I
yeah, exactly.
I bomb the tables and I'm like, oh shit. And I realized I lost a lot of money. I want to continue to talk about this. I want to give a huge shout out to one of our sponsors as we continue talking.
Yeah, I mean, this is what this situation feels like, Comrade Bill. I wouldn't beat my wife so much if she didn't make me so angry all the time. That's exactly what this feels like, isn't it? But no, it's all the Palestinians' fault. It's all their fault. Okay, we're not letting Elijah do a commercial. No, commercial.
When it wears off,
No.
and they just can't make any money off of it. That's the
No.
problem.
Why
It
is it?
dramatically extends the lives of test subjects, which is 5 things that don't work. If you don't like this, .com at check out your money back. If you're just joining in the idea expert, I would say, on war and being against unjust war, in the idea of constant conflict, we're talking about the truth of what's going on in Israel and Palestine, and basically we're going to get in a few minutes, we're about to get to the current situation of where we're at and we're going to start with the question of who's actually responsible, because if you are on Zionist Twitter, which is where all the world is happening now, called X, you will think that Hamas, every baby is Hamas in Palestine, and that we should kill them all, we should murder the babies. And if you are on pro-Palestine Twitter/X, you will think that the Zionists they're like the devil himself, and that they all deserve, the innocents deserve to be killed too, the babies. And we're going to show you tweets where both sides are calling to kill women and children. It's pretty crazy. So it's really important to be educated and to know what's going on, because I happen to be a little more down the middle, where I'm from an era where we don't think it's cool to kill innocent people, and killing babies is something that we leave up for abortion.
What a fucking concept. It's not cool to kill innocent people. What a concept. Who would have thought that saying it's not cool to kill innocent people would lead to you're an anti-Semite bigot and a Jew hater, Ben Shapiro?
And people who are into infanticide. So I'm getting back here where we're talking about Gaza and the relationship with Israel. And I'm going to throw back to my guest here to continue his thought. One second. Your mic is muted. I don't know if that's on our end here.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That was me.
All right, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm sorry. Let me pick up my train of thought. Well, I don't know. You remind me.
No, yeah, you're talking about the idea of like the fact we're talking about the 16.
It's factual that Israel created Hamas, Mark. It is factual. Israel's treatment of the Palestinians created Hamas. There would have been no reason for it to exist otherwise. I don't know why you feel the need to run cover for this bullshit, but your accusations and your constant whining in my chat is not hinged into reality. Hang on, there was another chat too. Yeah, and I agree with this as well. You know we're in the twilight zone when Nick Fuentes is the voice of reason. Yeah.
years that they are kept in Gaza. They're being held under this military order. They're
Oh,
not.
right.
They're
And
saying
one
they don't
state
want a
versus two
state.
states.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, one state solution versus two state solution and all that. So, look, the status quo is an absolute nightmare. The idea is independence or citizenship. And, look, let me say this too. I know that you have a very right-leaning audience, and I lean right in my own ways. I know how people feel about this, but if people want to be fair-minded at all about it, I know some people are, as you're saying, just calling for genocide or whatever. If people want to be, fair-minded at all about it, the Palestinians were there. Even if you like the Israelis more for whatever reasons, they're whiter, they speak English better, or whatever. You just don't like Arabs or Muslims or whatever. A lot of Palestinians are Christians, by the way. But, even still, you got to admit they're human beings. You got to admit this is a situation where it's the Anglos versus the Indians. And just because you're on the Anglo side doesn't mean those Indians got no rights at all. And that's what's happening here is essentially the victors, the conquerors, acting like they are, completely at the mercy, somehow being invaded by the country next door. When what's happening is essentially more like a prison riot, more like an uprising on an Indian reservation. Ben Shapiro, I guess quite famously, whenever this happens, he says, what would happen if the Mexicans or if Mexico was shooting rockets across the Rio Grande and killing Americans? What would we do? See, right there, he's lying. Right there, the implication is the national government in Mexico City and its standing army. That's what he means when he says the Mexicans shooting rockets over the border. But there's no sovereign nation, not really, out in, on the Indian reservation. They don't have any military power. Sorry, my dog's barking. I hope that's not too loud. They don't have any military power. If they're shooting rockets over the wall of an Indian reservation, then that's bad. And if innocent people are getting killed, that's terrible. We all condemn violence.
Yo,
but obviously, you would think
if you guys haven't seen District 9, District 9 is it's so old now, isn't it? But District 9 is a great movie. We should watch District 9 for movie night sometime. District 9 is highly, 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 highly relevant to the current situation. In fact, I might watch District 9 after this. Who knows? But that's a great movie, Benjamin. Thank you for reminding me of it.
this is a job for national government negotiators to solve, not to send in the Delta Force and kill everybody. There's got to be some kind of grievance that has these people firing their rockets over the wall that they're locked behind in the first place. You know, they talk about refugee camps in Gaza and in the West Bank. Well, who's living in those refugee camps? These aren't refugees from Iraq and Afghanistan. They're Palestinians. They're refugees from Israel, which used to be their country. And, you know, some of these people are still alive. You know, this is not ancient history. They were cleansed from their land back after the Second World War, and some of them more recently than that. And so now, look, back to the two-state solution, because here's the thing about that is it was always a lie. I don't know who coined this phrase, Elijah, but I like it. They said the whole thing about the peace process that you remember from your entire lifetime is the peace process is like two sides negotiating over a pizza while one side is eating it, right? And so that was what's happening. The Israelis are constantly colonizing the West Bank, colonizing East Jerusalem, making it impossible to create a contiguous Palestinian state.
Colonizing means taking of property.
This is what they call facts on the ground. Time rolls on, the facts on the ground means more and more and more settlements, making it more and more and more difficult for the West Bank to ever be an independent state. And then I'll spare you the exact quotes, but I have two of them here from Netanyahu himself, saying, essentially, there will never be an independent Palestinian state. All those years that I said, yeah, someday, well, I was lying. He doesn't say that, but yeah, he says there will always be one security force, one national government will control all of the land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea, right? Just like when the Palestinians say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Well, he's saying from the river to the sea, Israel will control all the land and the Israeli Jews will be free and the Palestinians will not. And they will never have their state. So when he started saying that officially.
Hang on. Bill has a good question. He's not a socialist. Why is he using the language? Because, well, it's true that like you can identify socialists based on the language they use. There are words and phrases that other political groups sometimes use as well. So you'll notice we're 40 minutes into this video right now, right? Scott Horton has not been saying abolish, liberation, solidarity, comrade, anti-racism, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, whiteness, like whatever. He's equity. He's not using the whole arsenal of socialist language. He used one word. Now, like libertarians use abolish as well, like abolish the Fed, right? But it's kind of like you have to sometimes use discernment to know that sometimes words are going to be used by other people, that like the fact that the word is used is not the indication they're part of the group, because you have to look at the whole big picture. Are they using one word or are they using 20 words? You know what I'm saying? It's an art, not a science.
In I guess 2019 and 20 was when he first started officially making those pronouncements. It was in 2021 then that B'Tselem, the Israeli rights group, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch all put out these giant reports. I urge people to read them. And I know Amnesty sometimes helps lie us into war, and Human Rights Watch makes their mistakes, and they're really bad on Israel-Palestine issues a lot of times even. But I urge people to read these things. I mean, the facts are the facts. You don't have to agree with everything they say in there. But take an honest look at B'Tselem, Amnesty International, and Human Rights Watch from 2021 saying this is apartheid. When you promise that one day you're going to give them independence, well, it's not apartheid yet. But once the gimmick is over,
an important question from Ketson. I'm glad you're back, Ketson. The beer is actually really good. It's a really nice pumpkin beer. I've never had it before. Again, I called it the Hitler beer earlier because it kind of looks like this is the Nick Fuentes beer. Cheers. But it's Virgil Pumpkin Ale, and it does actually have a really nice balance of pumpkin, but it's not too sweet, but it's like kind of savory. It's good. I'm liking it. Smells like cinnamon. It's good. If anyone else is drinking anything fun, put it in the chat.
The transparent lie has fallen away. Now it's apartheid. What else do you call it? I talked about an Indian reservation. Here's another analogy. What if in Mississippi in the 1950s, when the Supreme Court started striking down segregation, and they started in the 60s, they passed the civil rights legislation and so forth. What if Mississippi had said, absolutely not,
Hoegaarden is legit.
We will not desegregate.
Hoegaarden is a legit beer. It's like a white ale. I used to drink Hoegaarden a lot, but Hoegaarden was probably one of my first, like, it's not like a craft beer, but like not like mainstream kind of like Bud Light beers that I got into when I was back in college. It's a good beer. Ew, Scotch ales. I don't like Scotch ale, but as long as you're happy, Brent, I'm happy for you. Cherry cider. Oh, that sounds really good. A nice girly drink.
However, what we will do, we will let northern Mississippi go as an independent black state. So we will not give them their rights, but we will give them their independence, and then their rights will be up to them, and that'll be their problem. And so now we're going to engage in a peace process where we give up northern Mississippi to be an independent black state instead of giving them equal rights and ending Jim Crow. And then they never do that. And then the whites keep control of all of northern Mississippi and keep the blacks living under Jim Crow, half-assed slavery the whole time anyway, for 30, 40 years longer anyway, despite blowing a bunch of smoke about how one day they'll have their independence. That's the situation, and you can see why it's intolerable.
Well, can I ask you a question
all
on this
these
real fast?
Americans.
I just want to ask you.
Sure.
Okay, because on one hand, like I come from the evangelical like Zionist background, right? That's where I come from, and I both am not a huge fan of the evangelical church and seeing their actual effect on the world, and I've also drifted away from this sort of dogma and Zionism. But I also don't like Islamic extremism. Like I'm not retarded in terms of like these like queers that are like I'm queer for Palestine, and you're like, dude, they're not giving too kindly to queers. I mean, I've never had a real good experience with Islam.
As a reminder, queer is not about being gay or bisexual or trans or any of those things. Queer is nothing more than a far left political ideology. And while Elijah is right that like the whole non-binary queer bullshit would probably not go over well in Palestine like at all in any way, that's not the point. The point is that the left is taking here is what let's get to brass tacks about why the left is supporting Palestine. First off, Palestine represents an oppressed people in the face of the capitalist oppressor in this case being Israel. So socialists have always been on the side of Palestine, leftists have always been on the side of Palestine, but the reason that they're trotting out and doing these pro Hamas protests on college campuses right now is they are seeing this as an opportunity to what? Gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. Everything that the left does, every single thing they do is about achieving one and or more of those four goals: gain as much power as possible, destabilize the system, attack capitalism, usher in their Marxist utopia. They are using the situation to gain more power, to destabilize things, and to have a way to attack capitalism. That's all that they're doing. And I really, really hope that people don't allow the fact that the far left is supporting Palestine. I just made my phone go off for some reason. I really hope people don't allow the fact that the far left is supporting Palestine to influence what you do. Because I've been preaching this for years now. People have got to just stop reacting against everything the left does. They think, oh, the left is pro-Palestine. Well, I must be pro-Israel then. Well, no, bro, that's bullshit. You're literally allowing the left to dictate all your positions when you're saying the only reason I'm pro-Israel is because the left is pro-Palestine. How about you look at the situation for what it is and you make a decision? You say, do you agree that it's okay for Israel to keep millions of Palestinians in an open air prison that is not any bigger than like New York City? Do you think that's acceptable behavior? Like, if you do, then you probably are going to be pro-Israel. If you don't, then maybe on some issues, it's okay to have the same positions as the left because you have them for different reasons.
Islamic extremists. I don't think Islamic extremists like the United States. I get why they don't. I'm not going to go down that road. But it's like people think, oh, so you're really pro Hamas or you're really pro Palestinian. I mean, in my mind, I wouldn't want to live in Gaza. I don't want to live there. I don't want to. I would never want to be in that situation. I would never want to be under, Hamas leadership or under their control. It's like, okay, just because Israel is running apartheid, I mean, the justification. I want to hear your argument to this. A lot of people say, well, yeah, it's kind of shitty. And I think apartheid in South Africa was kind of shitty too when you looked at it in terms of the, on paper, Rhodesia, the separation of governance seemed shitty on paper. But then when you look at what happened with Zimbabwe, when, black people got control, they destroyed the country. When you look at what happened when communist Nelson Mandela and black people got control in South Africa, today I know a lot of universities are even banning white people from attending. Things have gone full circle and reversed, and they did not I don't think got better in these countries. So a lot of people point to these saying, well, yeah, maybe Israel is, doesn't look good. It's not good. But ultimately, like, what would you do if you had an enemy on your border? They have no choice now. This is like a necessary evil for them to maintain peace, because obviously we don't want to be rude to Hamas. and to the Palestinians, but also Hamas sucks and the Palestinians want to kill us. So if we don't, then we're going to die. It's like us or them mentality. What's your opinion on that perspective?
Okay, well, a few things there. I mean, first of all, just because someone is a Muslim doesn't mean they're an Islamist, which would, implies they demand an Islamic state and Sharia law. And there, of course, is very broad spectrums of political points of view inside Islam. And, I think Hamas is far from representative of the people of Palestine by and large. Again, it took the Israelis, helping them and suppressing their enemies to put them in power in the first place. So I don't really think of them, in that way. Also, when you talk about the necessary evil of this, I'm reminded of the quote from Thomas Jefferson when he talked about slavery. And he said, "We have the wolf by the ears, and we can neither safely hold him nor let him go." But the thing is, they're not wolves. They're human beings, and you got no right to hold them. You put yourself in a, touchy situation, figure it out. You can't just hold people in bondage because you're scared of what will happen if you release them. Again, the Palestinians were there first. It's not like they invaded from Syria somewhere or came across the Jordan River. This is their country. In fact, famously, in the 1980s, a lady wrote a book pretending all the Palestinians had invaded from somewhere else. And Norman Finkelstein wrote a book absolutely destroying every page of it and proving that is an absolute lie. And so look, there's no reason to think that, so if they have a one-state solution, or either way, they have a two-state solution or one-state solution, that necessarily means they're going to have an Islamist government take over the one state or the second state there, and then, war unending from that reason, from that way forward and all of that. I mean, the honest thing, the obvious thing is to have, as the most minarchist state possible, meaning the most minimal state, so that, like in our country, we don't even think twice about this, right? Even when we talk about the First Amendment, we don't even mention this part because it's so ingrained, no one even questions the separation of church and state in this country. No one would think. Imagine a state government trying to say, well, they'll stop you from going to church in the name of the germ, but they won't say, hey, listen, you have to stop going to Catholic church and start going to Protestant church because Michigan, we're a Protestant state now, or what. No one would dare to do that, right? In Texas, you'd be way out in the countryside and there's mosques and synagogues and whatever everywhere. Nobody cares. Nobody's threatened by that. Like way out in the country where people are pretty, Protestant and also, less educated and whatever, where you might think people would be afraid of and resent and clash with Muslims and Jews and whatever. Nope. Nobody cares. Nobody cares because nobody's using their power to inflict their religion on anyone else.
Okay, Mark. You are responsible for everything Joe Biden says. You are responsible for everything Joe Biden does. You and you alone, Mark, are responsible for everything Joe Biden does. And if Joe Biden does anything to upset anyone in the world, then you personally should be put to death for it because you are an American and Joe Biden is the leader of America. And therefore, Joe Biden is your fucking representative. You are responsible for everything he does, and you should pay for everything that he does with your life. And if you don't like that, then retract this fucking position. If you're going to honestly sit here and say with a straight fucking face that the Palestinian people are responsible for every single thing that Hamas says and does, then you fucking own it, bro. Do not hold people to a different standard than you are holding yourself.
And enforce anyone else to respect their customs and traditions and beliefs and whatever. So that's what they need is you could not, it's true. If you had a one state solution, it would no longer be a Jewish democracy. It would just be a democracy. Right. And then, yes, it's true also that democracy can mean just tyranny of the majority and three wolves and a sheep voting on what's for lunch and all those cliches. But again, if you have a very minarchist state, a very limited government where the job of the government is protecting property rights and creating a level playing field as best as possible. If that's the goal, then that can be done. Look, and we have binational states and things like this around the world right now. In Switzerland, it's divided in 4. And they get along. They've gotten along for centuries like that, with these 4 major ethnic cantons in Switzerland.
So let me ask you this. So let's get into the blame as we're talking. We can continue to talk about the context, but I want to bring up this tweet from Benjamin Netanyahu. I got to learn, these are called posts now. I don't know if that's difficult for you to remember how the terminology. I'm so used to calling this Twitter.
I just call it tweets and Twitter still. I don't like this formerly known as Twitter. We have to say that from now on.
Yeah, it's like the United States, formerly known as the British colony. It's just annoying. But I love Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel's at war. We didn't want this war. It was forced upon us in the most brutal and savage way. But though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it. Once the Jewish people were stateless, once the Jewish people were defenseless no longer, Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they have made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come. The savage attacks that Hamas perpetrated against innocent Israelis are mind-boggling, slaughtering families in their homes, massacring hundreds of young people at an outdoor festival, kidnapping scores of women, children, and elderly, even Holocaust survivors. Hamas terrorists bound, burned, and executed children. They are savages. Hamas is ISIS. And just as the forces of civilization united to defeat ISIS, the forces of civilization must support Israel in defeating Hamas. I want to thank President Biden for his unequivocal support. I want to thank leaders across the world who are standing with Israel today. I want to thank the people in Congress of the United States of America. In fighting Hamas, Israel is not only fighting for its own people, it is fighting for every country that stands against barbarism. Israel will win this war, and when Israel wins, the entire civilized world wins. So he says we didn't start this war. And so I kind of want to come on the context of this. I don't want to, you could do whatever you want, but I'm not going to justify, even if I understand certain things. Like I can understand something, but I'll never justify it. And I'm just going to come on and say, I'm not in the crowd that is trying to justify these attacks from Hamas on Israeli civilians and also on foreign nationals at the festival. I can't do that. I'm not going to do it. I think.
Hang on. I agree with what Elijah's saying, but I want to take the super chat from Naruto. Breaking CNN report. U.S. intelligence warned Israel of increased risks of attack before it happened. What have I been saying from the beginning? Israel knew this was going to happen. Egypt has now come out and said that they told Israel this was going to happen. The U.S. has now said that Israel, no, Mark, no, your fucking logic is confused, bro. And I don't want any more of this bullshit in my chat. If you are going to continue to whine in my chat, you are breaking rule number 2 of the chat, which is no fucking whining. You are not being an adult and holding yourself accountable to the same thing that you would put onto other people. And that's just cowardly as fuck, bro. So no more whining in my chat. I'm not doing it any longer. I don't want to hear it. You have lost your fucking privileges for today. Getting back to this, I said from the very beginning, Israel knew this was going to happen. And look, we're getting report after report after report. Israel knew this was going to happen, and they decided to let it happen because it was going to gain them more political power. And oopsie, now we have a chance to genocide the people that we've really wanted to genocide for a while. Thank you, Naruto. I do appreciate it. Jeff, thank you for the super chat, and thank you for being a member of the channel for 4 months. I really hate feeling like this was all planned. It's sickening. Yeah. It's pretty sickening that if you're a Zionist government, you would allow your own people to be attacked because you really want to genocide those pesky Palestinians. It is sickening.
I think it's evil what they did to the people. But I don't think that it's wrong to try to understand why someone does something, right? Just like if you somebody, disrespects your wife and you slit their throat, do you still get, thrown for homicide? Yes, but that's why we have a trial, because you understand, well, did this person were they just out of control and slit someone's throat, or what was the motive? And so I am not going to be taken out of context here. I think it's disgusting what Hamas did, but I also want to know, then
I agree with
This is where someone
Elijah.
got real. This is how someone unfollowed me. I said, if somebody's going to go out and
I
do something this
agree.
disgusting and barbaric, then they've got to feel justified in some way. I'm not saying they are. They've got to feel justified. And so what would make people feel justified to go kill a bunch of innocent people at a music festival, many of which are foreigners and not even from the country? Why do they feel justified in doing this? So that's my question. He said Israel didn't start this war.
Yeah.
They started this. Who started this war? Because it looks like this is now an escalation of conflict that we have not seen in the last 16 years in terms of Israel means business. So who's really at fault here?
Oh, I don't think there's any question that the U.S. knew they were going to be attacked on 9/11. I thought that was public available knowledge. I thought we'd already decided on that.
Well, look, it's very important. I like the way that you frame it as a big, messy question. If you start history on Saturday morning, then yeah, of course, Hamas launched this attack. Things had been relatively peaceful for a long time. They'd been abiding by a ceasefire or two, and these things come and go. But yes, this latest round of conflict, there's no question that they started it. Overall, that's a damn lie that, they just started the war. But we understand what he means. If we're being critical and honest, then we can still agree with him. And I got to say, I agree with a lot of what he said there. I would emphasize that, first of all, Hamas and the Palestinians is not the same thing. The people of Gaza, there are, something like 2 million people there. Most of them are minors. The majority of them are minors. So they could not possibly be somehow collectively responsible for voting for Hamas in 2006, which, by the way, that's what Osama bin Laden said about us. He said, you voted for this, so you deserve to die. That's in the letter to America. You can read on The Guardian right now. That's bin Laden logic, that if you vote wrong, it's okay to kill somebody, right? But here, these are children. Most of them are under 18 now, which means most of them didn't even exist or were toddlers at the time of the election of 2006, could not possibly have participated in any way. And they are the ones who are being made to pay the price for this. And politicians always do this. They'll say, even in one sentence, they'll say, important European powers like Germany, Poland, Putin, because you're not even allowed to say Russia.
All right, Mark.
It's like
goodbye.
They did with David Koresh. You're not allowed to think about all the nameless.
I told you to not continue whining in my chat, Mark, and now you're going to get blocked. Goodbye. I warned you on several fucking occasions. Do not break the rules in my chat. Do not test boundaries like spoiled little fucking children. You got like 14 different chances, Mark.
Faceless, innocent people around him. It's this one demon. You have to hate him, hate Koresh, kill Koresh, end him. And that's what they did. They said, just go in there and end it. Go in there and end it. It's the same thing you're seeing in your Twitter feed now. Go in there and kill them all till they're all dead. Well, who's all? Hamas or the 2 million men, women, and children of the Gaza Strip who are guilty of nothing but being born of the wrong religion, the son of a refugee who'd been cleansed from his own land? And it's completely crazy the way people take this. So that's the important point there. Another important point is that no, Hamas is not ISIS. In terms of the war crimes they committed over the weekend, that's some ugly stuff. But you know what? ISIS is not just defined by doing ugly things. They absolutely committed war crimes, but that's not what made ISIS ISIS. What made ISIS ISIS was the absolutely apocalyptic ideology of their leader, Baghdadi, and the people around him that took essentially Al Qaeda in Iraq and made it 10 times crazier. And well, I'll admit too, they had the opportunity to be much more violent for a much longer period of time. But I would point out, and it's true, that whenever bin Ladenite type radicals poke their head up in the Gaza Strip, Hamas always kills them. And Hamas did participate in elections. They have negotiated in international forums. They have said before, and people ignore this, they have said that they would recognize Israel within 67 borders. So they are not Al Qaeda. But going back to what he said about what they did when they launched this attack, it's absolutely heinous. And I would encourage people, though, only to recognize that it's deliberate, that what seems like just, pure barbarism is a provocation. It's terrorism. The purpose of terrorism is to provoke a reaction, right? And we saw this, especially, you see this with Islamist terrorist types a lot, because they are usually the much weaker power. And so look at Bosnia and look at Chechnya, and hell, look at Al-Qaeda attacks on America. They do an attack against a superior power, knowing that it'll cause the superior power to come and commit massive crimes against them. Then they hope to play on that and get a counter reaction from that, right? I saw a tweet where Scott Adams, who's a very smart guy, although I don't know he knows much about foreign policy, but he was just trying to reason it out. What could it be that they're trying to accomplish by doing something like this, right? Rather than, other than just taking out revenge and bloodlust on their victims. And what they're trying to do, I imagine, is they're trying to provoke the Israelis into doing exactly what they're doing, launching a massive assault on the Gaza Strip, which then forces leaders all over the region and populations all over the region to choose. So what does Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah in Lebanon, what does he say and what does he do? And what does the leader of Iran say and do? And then what about all the little kept imperial princelings of the Gulf? Mm-hmm. Mohammed bin Salman and Mohammed bin Zayed and all of the guys, all the guys that just signed the Abraham Accords with Israel and are the compliant clients of the United States. Are they going to stick up for the Palestinians, or are they going to stay quiet? And what are their populations going to think about that? And all these things. In other words, this is what the commies call commie revolutionary.
I don't know if people are keeping up with what's going on in all of these countries today, but there are massive protests in favor of Palestine. Massive, massive, massive protests in favor of Palestine in the Middle East. And we're not talking about violent protests. I mean, has anyone been keeping up with what happened in New York, where everyone kept saying, like, there's going to be a violent terrorist attack in New York? The Islamic terrorists are going to attack New York on Friday, and Laura Loomer was making this big fucking deal about the pro-Palestine protest in New York today. Like, did anything violent actually happen? Has there been any violent terrorist attacks today? I mean, people were freaking out all week. One of my supporters was like, they're going to target my city, and I need to keep my kids home on Friday. I was like, well, better safe than sorry, probably. But like, have there actually been any terrorist attacks today in the United States? Has there been any like significant violence in the United States? Isn't it interesting that there's no jihadi explosions today, even though we were assured all week that there were going to be violent Islamic extremist explosions today? Has that happened anywhere? So who benefited then from spreading those rumors? Who benefited from terror? I mean, like, if you are telling an entire population of people, they're going to get you, watch out. Like, there was a stabbing in France. I did see the video of a stabbing. That was bad. But was there anything else? Who benefited from people thinking that the violent Islamic extremists were going to attack everyone on Friday and we all better watch out and get out of major American cities? Why was that propaganda necessary to spread?
Bomb planters and throwers. We call heightening the.
And do we think it's any coincidence? Do we think it's any coincidence that it just happened that they were spreading lies and propaganda about there being Islamic extremist terrorist attacks in the United States on the same day that Israel is going to start a literal genocide of the Palestinians? Could it be that they wanted people to be distracted by the shiny twirly thing over here? Well, Israel is literally genociding the Palestinians.
Contradictions, right? So in other words, Hamas was trying to get those Palestinian kids killed. They were trying to provoke Netanyahu into bombing those buildings that you showed at the top of the show, so that those buildings would collapse on the poor Palestinian civilians, so that then others would take their side and would rally to their side. And the war
It
would
is
be
that,
further.
Jeff, isn't it? It
And,
is.
Who could justify that? Again, people got to break this into the difference between descriptive and normative, right? Like, what if we were talking about ancient history and we were just analyzing it, right? We're not talking about like, oh, whose side are you gay married to here, as in like some partisan way. We're just talking about like, what does it all mean? What's going on here? The Palestinians in the Gaza Strip are absolutely doomed. They're hopeless. Let me tell you, I was going to rant this earlier. Why do you think so many American Jews side with the Palestinians? I mean, overall, I'm not saying, I don't think anyone's or very, very, very few of only kooks would justify what they've done this weekend, killing innocent civilians. But I just mean overall, why would so many Israeli Jews side with the Palestinians when they had no other interest in doing so other than just what's right and wrong? And they just say it's wrong. Now look up Norman Finkelstein. And Norman Finkelstein is, a born and raised Jewish communist, the son of...
Hang on, I got a super chat coming in from Rottweiler. Thank you, Rottweiler. It's all political games. It's the neocons in power saying, this is why you need us. That's why they want people to be afraid of a possible attack. That's exactly right. It's neocon warmongering games. What a time to be alive.
2 Holocaust survivors who raised him to be against things like Holocausts, right? And then so what does he do? He sticks up for the Palestinians because the way that they're being treated is wrong. And he just tells the truth and he fights like hell for it. And so I think there's obvious wisdom in that, right? They're like, you don't see a bunch of Irish siding with the English, you know what I mean, in that fight. Because the English don't really have much to argue for their side of that fight. You know what I mean? They're the oppressors in that one. And yet look at all the American Jews who will be the first to point out to you how unfairly the Palestinians are being treated and being put in this position.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you. So I want to bring this
Sure.
up. This is really important. So, by the way, some of these people are my friends or at least colleagues that I've worked with. It's always really surprising to me in this industry. I've really tried to separate myself in the last year more from my background, which was more in the conservative establishment, simply because we've drifted in our viewpoints. I've gone a little bit deeper into my discovery, and they put a brakes on it, right? So when I worked for them, they used to really put a brake pad. If I went in just slightly the wrong direction, I'd have a meeting. I'd get the call. And I'd be in these positions to where I really was, in a difficulty. So I'm a married man and it's your job. And like I always say, people say, oh, you weren't being true to yourself. It's like, well, no, it's just like, you start to act like you pick up your friend's humor when you're around them, right? You start to pick up the words you act like the people you're around. And so sometimes that's why it's important to be careful who you're surrounding yourself with, because I genuinely believed certain things and they've changed. Now that I'm not surrounded by these people and you don't have people correcting you at dinner and telling you that you're wrong, and you actually can read and research and understand life, you can start to see that, hey, a lot of the people that are influencing the right wing are just objectively wrong, or they're intentionally intellectually retarded for the sake of keeping a status quo, like a sort of a gatekeeping.
Yes.
Now, some of these people I still like. One of these people that I don't care if the chat disagrees with me, somebody that I really respect and like, and I've worked with many times before and been friends with, is someone by the names of Laura Loomer. Now, this is not, we're gonna look at a few of these tweets. This was really crazy to me, okay? Because Laura Loomer's not loved by the left, okay? And in fact,
hang on. This whole thing about like there is no such thing as Palestine, I have heard this so much on Twitter, and I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's just made up foolishness. It's made up. It's not real. But let's see what Scott Horton has. I'm so glad Elijah's asking him about this. Listen, I questioned the wisdom of like what Elijah was doing when he started going on this like alt-right thing. And I was like, bro, really? Because I really do like Elijah. I really do. I think he's one of the good ones. Like, I don't know why. Like, I don't agree with a lot of the shit that comes out of his mouth. God knows. I also haven't watched him in a while because I stopped watching other people's content. So I don't know. Maybe things have changed. But But, like, I liked him and I wanted him to do well, and I was like, when he started doing this alt-right thing, I was like, "Bro." But it kinda seems to be, at least on this one, paying off. Oh, Loomer has gone fucking crazy this week. She has lost her goddamn I mean, really, she was always a crazy bitch to begin with, but she's lost her goddamn mind.
Of the right wing establishment has really, treated her poorly. She was kicked out of Twitter. She is Jewish herself. And she had written this, which blew my mind. I'm not going to lie. She said there is no such thing as Palestine. It's always been a figment of the imagination of Islamic terrorists and Jew haters. Israel belongs to Jews. For the sake of humanity and what is righteous and good in the war on evil, Israel must level Gaza, flatten it into a parking lot, and then glass it. The one-state solution doesn't include a world or scenario where Israelis can coexist with Hamas animals and their sympathizers. They must be shown through IDF force that they don't exist and their pretend homeland doesn't exist. We will not recognize these animals, and the entire world must unite in rejecting them and denying them any sense of dignity. There is no reasoning with Islamic terrorists. Every single Hamas terrorist and terrorist sympathizer must be killed by the IDF.
Hang
So
on.
that's a key word.
Got a super chat here from James Jones. Thank you. If there's no such thing as Palestine, I have to wonder where Walter Verda, I don't know how to say that name, came up with the name Palestinian lied back in the Middle Ages. I'm sure I just butchered the pronunciation of that. But I agree. Thank you, James Jones. Who is the Patriot nurse? I don't know who this person is. Who else has lost their mind this week? Which other content creators have lost the fucking plot this week? Let me know in the chat.
Every terrorist sympathizer must be killed. IDF can give 24 hours to women and children so they can evacuate, but then Gaza must be destroyed. Palestinian terror must be driven from this planet. There's a reason why no other Islamic country in the Middle East wants the Palestinians in their country. Their entire existence revolves around hating and killing Jews. There is no peace with these people. We can't coexist with barbarians who teach their children to kill Jews from the time they are born. There will never be peace in the Middle East, but there is life, and Israel has the right to protect that life. That's a lot of words in one tweet, but that is not uncommon.
Crazy.
What do you like? And I like Laura, but what the fuck was that?
Yeah. So yes, Dave Rubin has lost the fucking plot. Lost the fucking. I have always tried to really treat Dave Rubin with like kid gloves. I really have, because I think that I think that Dave Rubin used to be way more libertarian, and like he and I shared a journey of like leaving the left, like, okay. And I think like there was one point where he considered himself to be like really, I think, much more libertarian. And then he got enamored with Ron DeSantis, and then he moved to Florida, and then he became a statist authoritarian. And I really I was like, Dave Rubin thinks he's doing the right thing. I was really like, this is how I was rationalizing not shit talking him like publicly. I was like, he thinks he's doing the right thing. He really thinks he's doing the right thing. I had respect for him for launching locals. I lost a metric ton of respect for him when he sold locals to Rumble, because Rumble sucks on 19 different ways from Sunday. Rumble is an awful company. I can tell that from the outside. I know I don't like I am an organizational psychologist, but I don't think I needed to be able to tell that Rumble does not have its shit together. I think anyone that streams on the internet knows that Rumble does not have its shit together. And so I was really pissed off when he sold locals to Rumble, and I almost immediately started moving all my shit off of locals, because I was like, this is going to go to hell in a handbasket. But like even then I was like, he thinks he's doing the right thing. He thinks he's doing the right thing. And then when Dave Rubin came out this week and was like basically calling for the censorship of speech, like, bro, not cool. Not cool at all. Yeah, Cassandra Fairbanks is still actually, hats off to Cassandra, man. Hats off to Cassandra. She has been one consistent bitch, man. I agree. Rubin has like lost his fucking mind though. He really has. He has become belligerent. Tayton says this is what is called literal fascism. Indeed, Tayton, indeed. Jordan Peterson has also lost the plot. I mean, I think, well, no, I heard Matt Walsh and Candace Owens actually didn't lose the plot. So maybe it's not a Daily Wire thing. Just look at his Twitter. Just go look at his Twitter. Seriously. Go look at his Twitter. It's unhinged. Anyway, let's keep going.
Well, like, what is that?
You know, I mean, let's be charitable. It's stupid is what it is, right? I mean, I remember one of these terrorist attacks in France where ISIS machine gunned up the concert or the cartoon place, one of these attacks. And I was at a friend of mine's house and I saw his old mom, who I hadn't seen in years and years and years. His old mom was there. And she goes, well, I guess we just got to nuke them all. You know? And what's to me was so instructive about it is like, I mean, I know this lady and she's a sweet lady, right? And I also know this lady and I know that she doesn't know anything about anything, right? All she knows is it's the year 2000.
Hang on, I got another super chat coming in from James Jones. Thank you, James Jones. Perhaps we should study Palestinian education the way we do U.S. education. See MEMRI at all for reports on how Palestinian children are indoctrinated. Listen, I'm not arguing that they're not indoctrinated. I mean, it's a theocracy. Of course they're indoctrinated. By the way, children in Israel are probably indoctrinated too. If the conservatives had their way, there'd be conservative indoctrination in schools. This is why we need to get rid of public education entirely. So, I'm not taking that bait, James Jones, but thank you for the super chat.
16 and we're still fighting these Muslims. So apparently everything we've tried so far hasn't worked. So apparently we just gotta finally cut the cord, you know, light the fuse, call it off, turn the place to glass, because she's out of ideas.
Thank you.
Right? She doesn't know that these guys were mercenaries who worked for Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan and George Bush and Bill Clinton, but that George Bush and Bill Clinton bombed Iraq from bases in Saudi Arabia and supported Israel, killing Palestinians and Lebanese for the entire 1990s long, and that was what motivated al-Qaeda to attack us in the first place. And this goes right back to sympathy for Hamas. And you see over my shoulder here, I have this book I wrote called Enough Already, Time to End the War on Terrorism. Well, it's endorsed by Colonel McGregor, right? Everybody's conservative, favorite conservative anti-war colonel from Fox News. He endorsed my book, and it's endorsed former CIA officers and former military guys, and from Britain and Australia and all over the place who fought in the terror wars, who endorsed my book. And in that book, I explain at length why al-Qaeda attacked the United States. And Elijah, nobody who read that book, right? Some idiot who doesn't know on Twitter maybe, but no one who read that book accused me of taking al-Qaeda's side, accused me of being an al-Qaeda sympathizer, right? All it was I read a bunch of stuff that they wrote, and I read a bunch of stuff that experts wrote about them, and I interviewed a few, and I explained, here was their motive and here was their strategy. And here's how essentially what America did was fall in their trap and do what they wanted. Quite deliberately so, but still. But again, I'm not a Branch Davidian either, although I do have much sympathy for them, but I don't have any for their leader. But I do sympathize very much with the rest of the Davidians. They're wonderful people. But the rest of these, like whatever, what dog? Remember 20 years ago, Elijah, they would say, well, you're pro-terrorist. You're pro-Saddam Hussein.
Hang on.
But come on.
I have been saying the same goddamn thing all week. I was doing anti-war rallies when I was in college on the Boston Common. I remember exactly what the conservative right was like after 9/11. And I'll tell you what, like, it was all about, like, you're either with us or against us. You are a traitor if you don't want to go to war in Iraq. It was like they were villainizing anyone who didn't agree with them. And it's been so similar. And I don't know, was anyone else like active politically during that time, like in the build up to the George W. Bush era Iraq war, because it was like George W. Bush had like 80% approval rating or something. Like, it was not comfortable to be an anti-war person in the build up to the Iraq war because everyone was still pissed off over 9/11 and everyone thought Iraq was involved in 9/11. And of course, now we all know that Iraq had nothing to do with 9/11, but like, we didn't, well, weapons of mass destruction, da 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 da. We have to go to war. You're a traitor. You're with us or against us, like spitting on people, stuff like that. I remember that. And it was very, very similar to what I've experienced in the last week.
There was no such thing as the pro-Saddam Hussein club in America at all. Even Iraqi expats in America hated Saddam Hussein. No one in America was pro-Al-Qaeda other than a few Islamists living in Brooklyn or something, right? But as far as like someone didn't want to attack Iraq, think of just how inane it is to think that they were pro Saddam Hussein and his fascist regime. All it was they knew better than to invade this country that had nothing to do with the attack against us. And that a bunch of cynical neoconservatives were taking advantage of our crisis to launch an extra war. So it's the same thing.
Let me real fast. I just have to throw this in here. Sorry, real fast. I have to throw this in here because I know you're running out of time here for the interview, and I can keep going, but I just wanted to bring this up here. This is the managing editor, I think, Joe Pollock, senior editor at large of Breitbart News. Had obviously put out this as well, saying, I have broken the Sabbath and Jewish holiday to deliver this message. Israel should wipe out Gaza, allow 48 hours to evacuate women, children, the elderly, destroy everything that remains, plow it under, and annex it to Israel. This is the end of Hamas and Palestinian terror. The great Keith Woods brought up a counterpoint, and he said, the nationalists, aka people like myself, I'd consider myself more of a populist nationalist type of individual, get locked out of the political conversation by Conservatism Inc. I'm assuming he means the mainstream right wing, for moderate positions like opposing replacement immigration. Meanwhile, the editor of Breitbart can come on here and advocate wiping out an entire nation as an act of racial revenge for his people. Now, I just wanted to bring up this this double standard here.
You know what?
Yeah.
Sure. Let me make a point here real quick, because I got what Biden's got and I'll forget, but you'll like this. I mentioned earlier in the show about how people can read Andrew Higgins in the Wall Street Journal and Richard Sale in UPI for two about how Israel helped to create Hamas. Well, what that meant was they supported Sheikh Yassin. He was the old man in the wheelchair with the long beard. And you may not know, but it's important, I think, that everybody know that when Israel assassinated Sheikh Yassin with a missile, this old man in a wheelchair that they had supported in power all those years, when they murdered him with a missile strike in, was it April 2004? That's what caused the riot in Fallujah, when people rose up and they lynched the 4 Blackwater guards and burnt their corpses and hung their corpses from the bridge. And that was what became the excuse for the first major assault on Fallujah, where they did essentially what you just read him recommending. They told all the civilians to flee, and then they turned the whole city into a free fire zone, and they killed thousands of innocent people. Because of course, all the people didn't flee. Not all of them could flee. And they killed thousands and thousands. It was General James Mattis who led his Marines in there and committed this massive war crime. And they did it again after the election in November. And it was all because Israel assassinated some old man who was their sock puppet previously, that they decided that they didn't want anymore. And then for people who are familiar with the history of Iraq War II, that assault on Fallujah did more than any other thing to set off a wide-scale, broad-based Sunni insurgency against the United States in Western Iraq, from, Mosul in the north, all the way through, to Crete and Samarra and Fallujah and Ramadi, and all of Western Iraq went up in flames because of that. And it was because of Israel intervening there. And by the way, I mentioned this before, but only barely, and you should know this too, Elijah, that Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker on September 11th, and his pal Ramzi bin al-Shibh, who's in Guantanamo Bay right now, who they actually said they can't put him on trial because they tortured him out of his mind. Anyway, those two guys, they decided to join Al-Qaeda after Israel attacked Lebanon in 1996, in Operation Grapes of Wrath. And what's now called the first Qana massacre, because they did it again 10 years later in 2006. But in the first Qana massacre, they bombed a UN shelter where women and children were hiding, killing 106 of them. And when that happened, actually, it was before the massacre, just on the launch of the assault, Mohammed Atta and Ramzi bin al-Shibh filled out their last will and testament, which was like them joining the army, basically dedicating themselves to the war against who? Against the United States, as revenge for backing Israel for their sins in Lebanon. And then it was just a couple of months later that bin Laden put out his first declaration of war. Get this, it's called Declaration of War Against the Americans Occupying the Land of the Two Holy Places. Pretty subtle, right? And anyway, in there, he goes on at length about Operation Grapes of Wrath and the Qana massacre. And he says, we'll never forget the severed heads and arms and legs of the babies and the children there. And we're going to get our revenge against you. And that was why Mohammed Atta and Ramzi bin al-Shibh decided to travel to Afghanistan and go and get recruited into the September 11th plot. You can read all about it in the book Perfect Soldiers by Terry McDermott, a great LA Times reporter. And that was their primary motive. Egyptian engineering students studying in Germany suicide bombed our kamikaze airplane attacked our towers to get revenge for what Israel was doing in Lebanon. Now, instead of telling your mama that, George Bush said they hate freedom. They hate honesty and apple pie and Christianity and white skin and freedom and happiness. And faced with such an implacable and irrational, religiously motivated enemy, we have no choice but to go to total war from now on, he said. Now, we all know now that that was just a total lie. Bill Clinton was still backing these terrorists in Chechnya and in Macedonia, in Kosovo, right up until the attack. They were still, Britain, Saudi, and America were still playing games with these Al-Qaeda guys all through the 90s. They'd been attacking us since 1990. Bill Clinton was still backing them anyway. And they pretended all of this stuff because they couldn't just tell us the truth. That, some of our policies in the Middle East have angered the terrorists we've been backing in Chechnya lately. And by the way, a few of those hijackers had fought in Bosnia for Bill Clinton's side too, when America had backed Al-Qaeda in the war in Bosnia. So they do this all the time. They did this with Pearl Harbor. You take your red pill. FDR deliberately provoked Pearl Harbor and then deliberately turned a blind eye and allowed it to happen. And then, as the great historian Robert Higgs says, every other historian, what they do is they truncate the antecedents. In other words, World War II started when Japan attacked us at Pearl Harbor, right? What really happened was FDR put a massive embargo on oil and steel for the deliberate purpose of provoking them into attacking us. As Secretary of War Stimson said in his diary, by all means, they must be maneuvered into firing the first shot. And that was what they did. And they kept Kimmel and Short, the admiral and general in charge out at Pearl Harbor, out of the loop of intelligence and let them get nailed. And then
I really hope people are learning for this, because this is playing chess. What Scott Horton is describing right now is the way the world works. People are playing chess. There are a lot of checkers players that are pretending they know how to play chess when what they're really doing is playing checkers. And because they're playing checkers, they don't understand the moves that are constantly being made, where someone, I promise you, is always ahead and is always making the next set of moves. And how much time does he have? Come on. Like, I'm not doubting that he's not leaving stuff out, but like, if you listen, let me just like if you guys have never been in the position of having to be interviewed for a show like this and get out salient points while still keeping your answer succinct and not speaking for 3 hours on something that you probably could speak for 3 hours on, but you need to give enough information to make your point while still being succinct, it's an art form, dude. But my point is bigger than that. My point is that someone is always 3 moves ahead. And so your job, and this is in any situation, your job has got to be figure out what are the next 3 moves, and then what are the 3 after that, then what are the 3 after that. Like, you have to both simultaneously look at the situation as it is right now, but then also figure out who benefits from multiple different outcomes of this situation, and how can I get ahead of things so that it's not just about this. I'm moving the pieces in front of me. I'm moving the pieces 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps ahead. That's where you want to be. I don't think he has a narrative. His narrative is the truth.
Scapegoated them and blamed it all on them. Just as long as I'm up here ranting about things. That's the way FDR did it. And that's what they do. They truncate the antecedents. They don't tell you what happened before the thing that happened. And remember this, by the way, as long as I'm ranting all this great stuff. In 2007, the spring of 07, was the famous Ron Paul Giuliani moment. When Ron Paul said September 11th was motivated, the hijackers were motivated by American foreign policy. And Rudy Giuliani said, "How dare you? I demand you take that back. That's the craziest thing I ever heard." And Ron Paul said, "No, sir. The CIA coined the term blowback. It means the long-term consequences of their foreign policy." And everyone knows it's true. We all remember the 1990s. Bill Clinton had been bombing Iraq from bases in Saudi Arabia for 10 years before they hit us on 9/11. And that's why it happened. And people everywhere, by the millions, by the tens of millions, Americans went, "Whoa, you know what? I think that's right. That sounds right to me. I remember Bill Clinton bombing Iraq all the time. Those no-fly zones, right? Yeah. Bases in Saudi ever since Iraq War I. So that's why they attacked us, huh? And then the next day he did a press conference with the former chief of the CIA's Bin Laden unit saying, "Yep, you're damn right. That's what happened, all right." Was America built him up, then America stabbed him in the back and turned him against us. And then our government lied. George Bush literally said they hate our freedom. That was the motive of the attack, which if you play that out, think about how absurd that is. In America, where it's a super majority Christian nation, and where we also have millions of Jews and Buddhists and Muslims, 2 to 3 million American Muslims who go to whatever mosque they want to, Sunni or Shia or Sufi or Hanafi or whatever they want to do. Wherever they want, they build their own mosque on their own property, wherever they want, as long as they don't try to build it in downtown Manhattan. Bill Kristol will go after them. But otherwise, Muslims in America are protected by the First Amendment just as well as everybody else. There's never been an anti-Muslim pogrom in America, ever. And now I'm supposed to believe that's what Bin Laden hates about us, huh? Is that our super duper majority Christian society is willing to tolerate millions of Muslims praying and living and working in peace among us. Yeah, I think it must probably be support for Israel blowing little kids' heads off in Lebanon and Bill Clinton blowing little kids' heads off in Iraq, especially since that's what they said they were motivated by, you know.
Right. And so I kind of, so to wrap this up though, and to explain, the solution, I am blown away that when I say I've taken a centrist position on this, what I mean is I think I'm not an interventionist. So I just don't think that the United States obviously needs to be getting involved in this. I think if you look at some of these tweets by members of our own government, I'm going to see if I can bring them up, including, like I said, Jim Jordan, who is saying we must give Israel the time, space, and resources they need to destroy Hamas. I happen to respectfully disagree with that. And also, our favorite warmonger, Dan Crenshaw, has said this will not be a fleeting conflict in the Israeli-Palestinian saga. This looks like it'll be particularly the war to end all wars. That is very interesting wording, because that has been used so many times to fuel conflicts that were completely avoidable. But
I am so mad at myself for being fooled by Dan Crenshaw. Can I just say that? Okay, it was in 2020. I was in a bit of a haze in 2020, so I kind of forgive myself for it a little bit. Also, he has an eye patch, and I mean, there's something very sexy about that. But like, I cannot fucking believe that I was fooled by Dan Crenshaw, and I know some of you were as well. So, like, everyone just admitted in the chat. What a neocon warmongering jackass. How is it, truly, how is it that Republicans just keep electing such awful, awful, awful people? Oh, well, they're not Democrats. They're better than Democrats. No, they're not. They're not better than Democrats. They are not better than Democrats. Neocon, warmongering Republicans who will never do anything that you want them to do are not better than Democrats. And I don't care if they've got a fun campaign commercial where they're jumping out of a plane. They are not better than Democrats. Let them lose. Stop voting for these people, and perhaps eventually, if they lose and lose and lose and lose and lose and then lose again, the Republican Party will eventually deliver people that are actually worth voting for. Thomas Massey is the only legit person in Congress. I mean, I think Jim Jordan's okay. I'm glad Jim Jordan's going to win Speaker. That's pretty great.
Shocked about, and I'm genuinely concerned about, is when I say centrist, it doesn't mean that I don't have an opinion. It doesn't mean I'm being a fence sitter. It means that I'm looking at a situation that's not America. It's not my country. These are not my people. I am not ethnically or religiously Jewish. I am not ethnically or religiously Muslim or Arab. I have no connection to the Semitic people at all, besides my wife. But other than that, we raise our kid Christian, and we're not even involved in that. So whatever. But looking down the line, I'm trying to understand this, and I've made points. I go, hey, what Hamas did is A, horrible and should be condemned. B, you should try to understand why someone would do something horrible. C, the way Israel's treated the Palestinians is horrible and should be condemned. And D, if I had a answer, for this, people like, so you don't have a solution. Look, man, the last time a guy came up with a final solution to something, it didn't end well. So it's not like I have, it's not like I'm going to come up here and just say, yeah, here's my answer. Obviously, no one has the correct answer. That's why it hasn't been solved. I just know that glassing Gaza. Look, you do? All right. That's what I was going to end with. Please go ahead. What's the answer?
Yeah. Look, you found it. Non-interventionism is the answer, right? The only way that Israel can behave this way is because of the moral hazard of American support.
Yep.
Right. The international law says they have to get all their settlers out of the West Bank. Right. UN Security Council resolutions dating back since the 67 wars say you have to withdraw everybody out of the occupied territories. You can't do that. It's a war crime. And the only thing that allows them to get away with violating every other international norm when it comes to this stuff is American protection. So if America would just butt out, they would have to figure out a better way to proceed. Or a much worse one, but I think that's much less likely. Same thing. If it wasn't for the Americans, the Europeans also, I think, would back off their support for the worst of what Israel has in mind here. And so I think non-interventionism and let the people of the Middle East work it out themselves is probably the best solution. Because what happens is, take Lithuania at the start, right around, like a year and a half ago, I guess. At the start of the Ukraine war, Lithuania started blocking Russian concrete and steel supplies being shipped to Kaliningrad, this little Russian strip of territory landlocked away from Russia. I mean, it's on the Baltic Sea, but it's on the other side of Belarus and Lithuania from Russia. And so they have this corridor by railway. And the Lithuanians started enforcing sanctions on the railway. And the Americans actually told them, knock it off. Don't cause this problem. And so they did. But in the meantime, they told the New York Times, the defense minister, I believe it was, of Lithuania, told the New York Times, he said, look, we would never be so bold to take on Russia this way. if America wasn't supporting us. But since you are, we're taking the opportunity really to stick to them as much as we can, right? That's moral hazard, right? Like when Alan Greenspan promises to bail out a bank, or when the older brother promises to beat up the little brothers, the boys he's fighting with in the neighborhood, or something like that. It gives them incentive to do worse. And so we should knock that off. Hell, look, we started backing off out of Saudi a little bit, and China swooped right in and made a peace deal between Saudi and Iran. Now, who prefers George W. Bush's Sunni Shia sectarian war with 2 or 3 million dead the last 20 years to that? Not me. So I think, honestly, look, man, we should have, even if you believe in the whole Cold War against the Soviet Union, that was over 30 years ago. The middle part of North America should not be the world empire. We can't do it. We can't afford it. Our government completely sucks at it. And look at the chaos that they've wrought in the Middle East, in Europe, and working on Asia now. We should just come home, as Ron Paul said.
And I agree with that. And that is an absolutely interesting solution. As we close this out and talk about this, it is really, really interesting. It is really interesting. The amount of, like I mentioned earlier, friends and
I
relationships.
just want to say, and this is not to do him anything, Elijah's looking really good. He's looking in shape. Like, I feel like he's like put on a lot of muscle. Like, Australia seems to be treating him well. Parenthood maybe is treating him well. Good for him.
That I've lost, not because of things that I thought I would have lost them over, but because of just holding like incorrect political opinions. I mean, I have put out polls on the internet just asking people if they believe in certain conspiracies, and there are people now that I know that won't even shake my hand because I asked
Nick
a
has
public
competition.
question, and it's really alarming to me how disillusioning it
The most fierce of which would probably be my husband, but we can play internet fun time.
is to realize that for years you sort of worked a career to build up and help support a infrastructure and a media apparatus that is keeping people trapped in the same thinking you thought you were fighting, right? And it is really hard to see. And when you break out of that, people start to call you a lot of names. They start to try to pigeonhole you, label you, and isolate you so that your voice can't be heard. Now, unironically, I've never been doing better. I've never had more opportunities. I've just got a really good opportunity offered my way too. I basically don't. I have too many offers to take them all. I've remained completely independent, and that's given me a voice now to be able to say exactly what I want. Yeah, I have some contracts with people, but they don't control what I say. I'm not a W-2 employee, and I contribute, and that's different. They cannot publish what I send them, but I send them whatever I want, and that's a freedom. You
That's
obviously to plug your website, you run. Let me see if I can bring it up here. You run this antiwar.com. It's sorry for my crop, guys. This is not his website. This is my fault here. You can actually go to it, antiwar.com. You can follow him on X as well. Tell us a little bit about this website, what it persists. It's ANTI or news.antiwar.com, or you can just go to antiwar.com, I think, right? Or is it just news.antiwar.com?
Well, no, it's antiwar.com is the front page, and then news is all of our in-house guys' news summaries. If you go to news. And then there's also original.antiwar.com is all of our regular contributors. And the site's been around since 1995. It was founded in opposition to Bill Clinton's intervention in Bosnia. And then they really made their
Typical
big break
libertarian
opposing his
site.
war in Kosovo in 1999. Formerly, our head writer was the great Justin Raimondo, who was the author of Reclaiming the American Right, the Lost Legacy of the American Conservative Movement. And we just got an absolutely fantastic collection of columnists, and our staff, our opinion editor, Kyle Anzalone, picks the very best views from all across the spectrum. We're all libertarians that run the place, but we, feature the very best of the left and the right on foreign policy, and always have. He's retired now, but we've always been very close with Pat Buchanan, for example, as well as Daniel Ellsberg and lots of other people. Ron Paul, of course, as you can see, the bust in the picture behind me there. We're Ron Paul folk, at our core. And then also, and I'm the editorial director there. I don't want to take too much credit for the site. It's Dave DeCamp and Kyle Anzalone and Eric Garris. are the real champions that make that thing go there. And then I'm also the director of the Libertarian Institute. And we've got a bunch of great podcasts and a bunch of great writers. We specialize in foreign policy, but also a lot of other libertarian topics. And we publish books, including my own about the terror wars. And we're about to publish Jim Bovard and Tom Woods' new books. And so we're real excited about that. Tom Woods has a new one all about COVID, the COVID lockdown regime and all of that kind of stuff. So all that's at libertarianinstitute.org. And then at scotthorton.org, I got almost 6,000 interviews. It's 5,950 something now, I believe, at scotthorton.org, going back to 2003. And that's my podcast, and it's essentially all foreign policy stuff. And right now, Elijah, I'm working on a book that so far is 1,100 and something pages long that I'm going to have to figure out how to cut way down.
Jesus Christ.
That's called Provoked: How America Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. So that'll be the enough already of Eastern Europe here for you. And hopefully that'll be out early next year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to my guest, Scott Horton. Guys, if you're watching the show, remember, we're demonetized everywhere.
Thank you, Scott Horton, and thank you, Elijah, for a good interview. I mean, I learned a lot in that. It basically confirmed everything that I kind of thought. So I wasn't exactly surprised, if I'm honest. I'm not surprised. I'm just disappointed. All right, guys, that's all we have for tonight. Thank you for spending some time with me. Now, as a reminder, tomorrow, 3 p.m., we are doing Bitchcraft in my supporter community. Bitchcraft is an open Zoom call where you can come and bitch and craft. You can do like knitting, like the band Knitting Shawl that I'm working on right now, which of course is the far most superior of all craft. You can do sewing, you can do quilting, you can do crochet, you can do needlepoint, you can fold your laundry, you can clean your gun. I don't really care what you do. You can just come and hang out with us if you want. You don't even have to bring anything with you. If you just want to come hang out, that's fine. If you want to join us for Bitchcraft, the easiest way to do that is by heading over to my Substack, which is Carlyn, KARLYN.substack.com. and signing up. Well, Brian, I can't help but notice that you brought no receipts and no perspective of your own, just shitting on other people's points of view. I just can't help but notice that. Anyway, we're doing me time right now. If you want to come join us for Bitchcraft, the best thing you can do is sign up for my Substack as an $8 a month supporter or an $80 a year supporter. And then what you want to do is you want to go to this here newsletter, the Unwoke Roundup right here, for the week 40, September 31st through October. Wait. That probably should have been September 30th. I don't think there was a September 31st. That's funny. Anyway, go to last week's newsletter. Ignore the dates. But what you want to do is scroll all the way down to the bottom, and underneath this red box, which you will not see when you are a supporter on my Substack, you will receive links to the community Zooms, which were already happened this week. But you will also receive a link to Bitchcraft. I will also send it out in the chat tomorrow on the Substack. So you can find that there. And then you can come and join us for that. If you are a member of Locals or a member of Patreon or a Twitter subscriber, I will be posting the Zoom link there. So you can come and join us. You can come and join us for that if you want to. We, of course, are also doing movie night on Sunday at 8 p.m. in the supporter Discord. And I will be back tomorrow for Socialism Saturday. We are actually going to do Socialism Saturday tomorrow. I don't know what we're doing yet for Socialism Saturday, but we will do Socialism Saturday at 6 p.m. tomorrow. I'm not giving that up for all of this bullshit. But guys, thank you for hanging out with me today. I do appreciate it. That's all we have. I'm going to go drink some more beer now and unwind and stuff like that. Take care, guys. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you soon. Bye.